The Witcher, Elemental Lords. Chapter 1. The Mafa Continent, late winter of the new calendar year 323. Doman County, Kris Province, Uganda Kingdom. Doman County is a typical mountainous county, its agriculture entirely reliant on the flatlands surrounding the river valley. Every year, it barely manages to sustain a portion of its population's normal life under the attacks of various wild beasts and monsters from the mountains. Doman County's largest source of income is its mines. The vast majority of young and middle-aged men, as long as they have a bit of strength, will work in the mines scattered around. Doman County is also the only county in Kris Province without any nearby towns. It is just a solitary city, standing in the valley, surrounded by mountains. The mountains are basically all mines, with roads extending from the city gates into the mountains. At the entrance of the Bianchi mine, Dole painfully climbed up from the ground. He watched the backs of Odo and his gang as they snatched the 3 Mafa copper coins from his pocket, and gently exhaled. He felt no regret or resentment, because he still had 2 Mafa copper coins left in his pocket. These 2 coins were enough for him to live for a day. His tattered clothes were covered in dirt, and at this moment he looked like a mud monkey. Every morning, he would come to the Bianchi mine to smash rocks. From morning until dark, because of his thinness, he could only earn 5 Mafa copper coins. 5 copper coins were basically only equivalent to 1/5 of an adult's income. After eating dust in the mine all day, he would still have 3 copper coins snatched away from him when he returned at night. It was impossible for Dole not to feel resentment. However, he was alone, while Odo had several hooligan followers and was also the son of Sam, a small foreman in the mine. If he resisted and beat Odo, he would lose his job, and he was counting on these few copper coins to survive. He sighed, patted the dirt off his clothes, rubbed his arm which was aching from the kick, and walked towards his small nest with heavy steps. The house was left by his father, who was also a miner. 2 years ago, he contracted pneumoconiosis and died in agony. After his father's death, his mother disappeared one night, leaving him alone. He relied on working in the mine every day to barely survive. Now, 2 years have passed. The once lively and happy Dole had long since died, leaving only a Dole who was barely living and whose expression was numb. He is 12 years old this year, and according to reason, he is at the age to go to school, but there is no school for him to attend. The Bianchi mine is some distance from the city. Along the way, one can pass a market. The miners buy something to eat here every day after work before returning home. This market is also the largest market near the Bianchi mine. Because Dole was robbed by Odo, he returned a little later. There was no one on the road, and he could only feel a burst of noise when passing through the market. Just as he walked into the market, a man walked up to him, patted Dole on the shoulder, and said in a low and tired voice, "Don't think too much, go back and rest well, we still have to work tomorrow." Dole looked at the man, didn't say anything, just nodded. This was a partner who worked with him, named Dodo Olemu. He was 30 years old this year, and he had 2 4- or 5-year-old sons. His whole family depended on his job to survive. Dodo left, and Dole dragged his tired steps to the stall he often visited, carefully took out a copper coin, handed it to the ant selling food, and said, 3 vegetable buns. The ant looked at Dole, without much expression, took the copper coin, put it in the drawer of the counter, and then quickly wrapped 3 vegetable buns and handed them to Dole. Dole lowered his head, stretched out his hands to take the vegetable buns, and said, "Thank you." His hands were a little trembling at this time, because he was hungry. The ant didn't say anything, because she was very busy and had other people to greet. Dole took the vegetable buns and walked out of the stall, trembling as he unwrapped a vegetable bun, and then took one and quickly took a bite. The vegetable bun didn't have much nutrition, but it was the only most affordable thing Dole could buy. He had to eat 2 of the 3 vegetable buns to feel a little full, and the last one was prepared for a dog he had picked up in the past 2 days. Dole felt like he was crazy these days. He was almost starving himself, but he still had the heart to sympathize with a dog. But it was also strange. The first time Dole saw the dog, he felt a strange emotion in his heart. He just wanted to raise it, he just wanted it to live, even if it only ate 1 meal a day, he wanted it to live. There is hope only if you live, this is what his father often said before his death. Dole lives in the slums of Doman City, not far from the city gate. Entering the city gate, you can see rows of low, dilapidated and even tattered houses on the left side of the avenue. This is the famous slum, with garbage, sewage and dirt everywhere on the ground, a dirty look. No one cares here, and there are poor people everywhere who can't get enough to eat. Even thieves rarely come here. In the positions near the avenue, rows and rows of women standing at the door, posing coquettishly, can be seen everywhere. These women have ordinary appearances, but they are very easy to support, often only costing 5 copper coins a night, which is very cheap. Those women often stretched out their white thighs to Dole, but Dole didn't even look at them. He himself couldn't get enough to eat, let alone help others. He could only look at the door and feast his eyes. Returning to the door of his house, he pushed open the door, and a dog with 3 stripes of grey, yellow and black happily drilled out of the door, licked Dole's hand, and wagged its tail excitedly. Dole casually threw the vegetable bun to it. "Odo, go eat it." He named this dog Odo, and he was quite excited. He wondered what Odo's expression would be when he heard this. Odo glanced at the vegetable bun, seemed to hesitate for a moment, then bit it in one bite, and walked towards the room limping, wagging its tail happily as it walked. The room was very dim, without lights. Taking advantage of the feeling, Dole walked to his bed and lay down directly, only feeling a wave of drowsiness hit his heart. In less than a second, a burst of snoring sounded. Not long after, Odo limped out of the corner. This time, it didn't wag its tail. Its eyes were full of scrutiny and solemnity. Looking at the sleeping Dole, the dog's face was full of complex emotions. "I never thought that I, the hell demon hound Baal, would survive on a few vegetable buns. This world is really wonderful. This kid only eats so little a day, and he still shares some with me. It really moves this demon hound. Forget it, I'll stay here for a while. I'll leave after I recover 10% of my strength. This kid is destined to be with me, so I can give him some benefits." The hell demon hound turned its head and looked around the room, shaking its head. A small room, a bed and no usable furniture in the house. This is Dole's home, and it is often visited by thieves from time to time. It is also difficult for this child. After living here for a few days, although it was a little uncomfortable, Odo felt that he couldn't leave yet. He still owed this child something. Yes, without those broken vegetable buns, he probably wouldn't be able to survive. He became a little annoyed. If it wasn't for that bitch, how could he have lost to the 3-tailed fox and almost died? It was really damn. How could he have made such a low-level mistake? If Dole hadn't picked him up, he would have really died. Thinking of this, the hell demon hound's dog face was filled with complex emotions. Seeing the sleeping Dole, the hellhound Odo opened its mouth and sprayed a 5-colored light, which flew towards Dole's brain. This light was very small, only the size of a thumb. After touching Dole's forehead, it quickly disappeared. Dole didn't know what was going on these days. He had the same dream every day. In his dream, he dreamed that he had become a gentleman wearing strange clothes. He could use a kind of flame between his gestures to burn every evil creature he could see. This feeling was very strange, but also very powerful. Chapter 2. When I woke up in the morning, that feeling would slowly fade away, but strangely, I felt very energetic, and my strength would increase a little. Before, Dore felt sore all over every morning when he woke up, as if he had died. He would never have this feeling. How should I put it? It was like being relaxed and happy, as if his whole body was full of strength. When did it start? It seems like it started on the 3rd day after picking up Adu. Dore thought for a while, maybe it was because he did a good deed and God rewarded him. Thinking of this, Dore got out of bed and checked his body, but found nothing major. At this moment, Adu crawled over from the corner and licked Dore's palm and cheek. With this thought, Dore liked Adu even more. It seemed that even the resentment towards Adu for stealing his money outside had lessened a lot. He touched Adu's head, scratched it casually, smiled, and said, "Be good at home, I'm going to work." He didn't care whether Adu understood or not, and went outside to wash up. In the middle of the slum, there was a half-meter wide waterway. Water from the mountain flowed down from above, passed through the slum, and flowed to the Doman River outside the city. Dore washed his face, wiped it casually with his sleeve, and walked towards the outside of the city. He passed by the market, bought 3 vegetable buns from that shop again, and finished them in one breath before going to the mine. When he arrived at the mine, Dodo had just arrived not long ago. Seeing Dore, he said loudly, "Today we are not smashing stones." The foreman said, "Let us go to the river to screen small stones today. Some colored ores were mined today, and they want us to screen those stones." Dore nodded and followed Dodo. No matter what he did, as long as he had food to eat, it was fine. His purpose was just to live. The mine was very large. The entrance was a flat ground, and the flat ground was piled with various stones. The job outside was to smash these ores one by one, crush them, pick out the parts inside that contained ore and put them together, and throw the other gravel on the ground. Someone would take away all those gravel. The wages of the miners working on the open space outside were not high, while the wages of the miners in the mountains were a little higher, about 5 times that of the miners outside. However, it was also particularly dangerous. Almost every day, people died due to various things, and the deaths were tragic. However, there were still many people willing to go to the mountains because the wages were very high and the pensions were also very high. Even if they died that day, the wives and children they left behind would be well taken care of. This was the main reason why they were willing. Those who worked on the flat ground outside, except for the old and weak, were those who had only one laborer in their family, or those who lived alone, like Doré himself. Doré followed Dodo and some other people, and soon came to the river. Doré saw that many small stones had already been piled up by the river. These small stones were different from the stones he usually saw in the open space. These stones were grayer, denser, and looked very heavy. After Dodo introduced them, Doré understood that they needed to make these small stones even smaller. Among the small stones, there were some golden small stones. They needed to screen out the golden parts and didn't need to care about the others. Doré nodded. The two occupied a small section of the river and started working. The content of the work was still to swing the sledgehammer and crush the stones. The difference was that today they didn't need to distinguish with the naked eye, but used a sieve to screen the stones. Doré had also seen this kind of golden stone. This was real gold, but he didn't have much greed. In the mine, gold ore was not very common. The most common were iron ore, tin ore, and copper ore, with iron ore being the most common. Gold ore only appeared occasionally, and the quantity was not large. Some people had wanted to take these gold ores for themselves, but the consequences were generally very miserable. The mine had a kind of alchemical product that could detect whether a person was carrying metal on their body, and it was always accurate. As long as they passed through the gate, it was easy to distinguish, so no one dared to do this. Moreover, miners had no human rights. As long as they were caught on the spot, they would immediately be demoted to slaves and hung at the gate for 3 days to warn future generations. In 3 days, those who were lucky enough not to die would basically become useless, and they would die miserably in the future. So, generally speaking, no one dared to do this. Doré had seen many things in this city for so many years and had long been numb. What he had to do now was to survive as much as possible. Therefore, no matter what kind of ore he had in his hand, he should honestly complete his work and not cause trouble. Dodo and Doré had worked together for a long time. Dodo naturally knew what kind of person Doré was. Seeing his expression, he grinned and said, "Let's work. Today's money is a lot. You can give me the other copper coins that exceed 5 ma-fa copper plates, and I will take them out for you. Let Adu, that bastard, steal 3 if he wants to." Hearing this, Doré's eyes lit up, and the whole person changed from numb to lively. "Then thank you, Uncle Dodo." This was probably the best news he had heard today. Doré was immediately full of energy. He felt that his whole body was full of strength. There were many stones, and they needed to be smashed into pieces with a hammer. However, gold ore was different. He needed to smash it even smaller. Doré had been smashing stones for several months and had already developed a good strength. Immediately, he picked up the sledgehammer and began to find a place to smash stones. Small stones have this advantage. One person can complete the work. For large stones, you need to use a sledgehammer and iron chisel to divide them first, divide them into small stones, and then slowly break them into pieces. This takes a long time. But small stones don't need it. Put it on the hard ground and smash it directly. However, after smashing for a while, the two of them, one smashing and one starting to screen, cooperated tacitly. Soon, some yellow-orange small metal pieces appeared on the river bank, all of which were gold. There were supervisors near the miners, but as long as you worked hard, the supervisors would not pay attention to you. Only those who were lazy and unwilling to work hard would be taken care of by the supervisors. At least they would scold them a few words, and at worst, the leather whip in their hands would come in handy. The leather whips were all made of water-soaked cowhide tendons. One whip would guarantee that the skin would be torn and the flesh would be ripped open. The taste was very sour and refreshing, so few people challenged the supervisor's authority. About 2 hours after starting work, the supervisor came to the two of them, took away the gold expressionlessly, and then sent 2 small rice balls. Because they had to do a lot of physical activity, the miners usually ate a lot. General mines would arrange for food delivery, but there were requirements. They had to finish eating quickly, and if they couldn't finish it, it would be taken away. On this point, almost all the miners were very satisfied. This was also the reason why Dore liked working in the Bianchi mine. After eating ravenously, Dore felt that he had strength again and started working with Dodo. The process of smashing stones was uninteresting, repeatedly scattering his sweat. Under the sun, everyone's body was bronze, and their muscles were bulging. Even the thinnest person would become like this after working in the river for a month. Dore was no exception. The process of working was very boring, and only when screening stones and seeing those yellow-orange particles would they feel a sense of accomplishment. Chapter 3. Beside the still somewhat icy river at the end of winter, Dorlai didn't feel much cold, his whole body emanated wisps of heat. He sifted, his eyes glued to the yellow-orange stones, afraid of missing a single piece. As he sifted, Dorlai quickly noticed a strange phenomenon: some glittering little stones always appeared in the last of the sieved ore. Generally, gold was dense and wouldn't be moved by the river's current, so it would be left until last, but what were these glittering stones? After sifting for a while, he had dumped many glittering little stones. Once again, he couldn't resist, and he picked one up and examined it. The stone was pure white, a somewhat translucent cubic crystal, very beautiful. Holding it in his hand, he seemed to feel a faint coolness seeping out. Sensing this coolness, Dorlai felt his mind become much clearer, and he also felt that the stone seemed somewhat familiar, but he didn't know where the familiarity came from. Sensing this, Dorlai knew that these glittering little stones were not simple, they seemed to be something extraordinary. Because this thing wasn't metal, the mine certainly wouldn't want it. When Dorlai was picking up gold ore, he put these glittering stones in his pocket, planning to take them back. He always felt the aura of these stones was familiar, but he didn't know where that familiarity lay. With this question in mind, Dorlai continued to work. As the sun slowly passed over the mountain peaks and the sky began to dim, he had already accumulated a pocket full of glittering little stones. Time to get off work. He went to the supervisor to collect his pay and really received 2 extra copper coins. Dorlai nervously looked around. Aldo wasn't there, he must have gone to rob someone else, so he wasn't paying attention here. He quickly handed the extra 2 copper coins to Uncle Dodo. The two exchanged glances and quickly arrived at the mine entrance. Dorlai anxiously passed through the instrument. As expected, the instrument didn't sound, and he breathed a sigh of relief, but as soon as he came out, he ran into Aldo and his gang. Seeing Dorlai come out, Aldo walked out with a sinister look. Without a word, he stepped forward and pushed Dorlai to the ground, and then several people savagely searched Dorlai's body. Dorlai didn't resist, because resistance was futile. He just calmly looked at Aldo, who was high above on the side. Aldo arrogantly directed his subordinates, looking at Dorlai, his mouth full of mockery. "What's wrong? You're not convinced? If you're not convinced, get up and hit me. Damn bastard!" Pui. The child who pushed Dorlai down and took the lead in robbing him was only 14 years old, tall and strong, Aldo's #1 thug. After spitting on Dorlai, the group swaggered away. Seeing them leave, Dorlai touched his pocket and found that there were still 2 copper coins left, and he felt relieved. Today, Aldo could have 2 more vegetable buns to eat, and there would still be 1 copper coin left to save up. Thinking of this, Dorlai felt happy, and he didn't feel much resentment even after being pushed down and insulted. He wiped the spit off his body and walked towards the city as if no one else was there. Dozens of cases like Dorlai's happened every day at the entrance of the mine, and no one cared at all. Arriving at the market, Uncle Dodo was already waiting for him nearby. The two quietly made the transaction and then left with tacit understanding. He spent 2 copper coins to buy 6 vegetable buns. Dorlai immediately ate 4 of them and then put the remaining 2 in his arms. Following the crowd, he returned to the city. At this time, the sun was setting, and the evening clouds were red, and the western sky was very beautiful. Returning to his small shack, as soon as Dorlai entered, Aldo poked his head out from inside, his dog face full of doubt. Seeing Aldo like this, Dorlai didn't care much. He put the rice balls in a broken bowl, threw them to him, patted his dog head, and then lay down on his bed. After eating 4 vegetable buns in one breath today, he didn't feel very tired and could stay awake for a while, so he took out all the small stones in his pocket and poured them on the ground. At this time, he found that Aldo was a little strange, because Aldo didn't eat the vegetable buns at all, but followed him over, his eyes staring straight at the small stones in his hand. Dorothy smiled slightly, put all the small stones on the ground, picked one up, shook it at Aldo, and smiled, "What, do you also like these small stones?" The hellhound Aldo was thinking at this time, "Damn it, I can even find magic crystals here. It's really ghostly." But he didn't dare to say it, so he gently licked Dorothy's hand, rubbed against him a few times, and deliberately licked the stone into his mouth. When Dorothy saw Aldo like this, he was shocked. He panicked immediately. He rushed up, ready to hold Aldo down and pry open his mouth to get the stone out. It actually ate a stone. This dog doesn't want to live. It wasn't easy to find a living thing to live with, and Dorothy didn't want him to die so soon. However, Aldo obviously didn't want to let him succeed. He ran left and right, and Dorothy couldn't catch him. Instead, he found a chance to eat a few more stones on the ground, feeling very happy in his heart. I haven't seen magic crystals in a long time. Although they are magic crystal remnants, with these magic crystals, my injuries can heal quickly. Aldo naturally wouldn't tell Dorothy this. While avoiding Dorothy's claws, he secretly ate the magic crystals, until he had secretly eaten all the magic crystals, and then he licked his face and ran to Dorothy's side, rubbing against his thigh, licking his hand, his tail wagging even more happily, as if asking, "Are there any more of these stones?" Dorothy was already dumbfounded at this time. This guy actually ate it. And he finished it all? Nothing happened? However, seeing that Aldo was still alive and kicking, and nothing happened, and he was even more energetic, he didn't bother to feel sorry for his stones, as long as the dog was okay. He carefully touched Aldo all over, and after confirming that he was okay, Dorothy was surprised instead. Could that stone be eaten? With a belly full of doubts, Dorothy quickly fell into a deep sleep. In the middle of the night, Aldo got up from the ground, staggered over, lowered his head, looked at Dorothy, pointed out a ray of light, flew towards Dorothy's forehead, and then he quietly opened the door and walked out of the doorway. He knew Dorothy's workplace. There were actually substandard magic crystals there. There must be a miniature magic crystal mine. He had to quickly absorb all the magic crystals so that his strength could recover a bit. Hellhounds were good at hiding, tracking, and hunting. Soon, he tracked Dorothy's scent and quietly entered the mine. In the dark night, the hellhound's grey-black figure was like a no-man's land, and no guards discovered him. He came to the small river, which was the last place Dorothy appeared. After sniffing it slightly, he identified several other scents, so he tracked the source of the scent and went up the mountain. The whole process was silent. There were a lot of stones in the mine, and they were all raw ore. All the broken stones were piled together. In the middle of the night, no one could tell which of these ores were ore and which were waste rock, so they were piled together like that, and no one was guarding them. The dead of night provided Aldo with many conveniences for committing crimes. The main purpose of his coming tonight was to see where the ore vein was, not to absorb it directly. There was plenty of time in the future, so there was no rush. Chapter 4. Duomon County was just a small county town, where the highest level of strength was only level 1. The hellhound itself was level 7. Although it was seriously injured, it was still not something that level 1 knights, warriors, or wizards could deal with. Here, it could slowly heal without rushing. The only thing that made it feel slightly pressured was that the magic crystals must not be discovered by others too early, or else it would have nothing to do with it. If it could confirm the location tonight, it would absorb all the magic crystals from the ore they could dig up tomorrow, without them noticing. Magic crystals are the gathering of energy between heaven and earth. For higher creatures, they can be directly absorbed, which is of great significance for its recovery. The bit of magic crystal from this afternoon was not even enough to fill the gap between its teeth, but with that little bit of magic crystal, it had at least recovered a little. The hellhound leaped through the mountains, quickly arriving near the mining location from the river. With its mental strength, it could easily sense the subtle magical fluctuations hidden in the mountains. It walked around for a while, looked around for a long time, and then chose several places, standing there motionless, but its mental strength had already penetrated deep underground, detecting the slight impurities and magic crystals on the surface, absorbing all the elements inside. It was a level 7 creature, although its strength had fallen to around level 1, this kind of ability was still a piece of cake. After busying itself for most of the night, it was still not finished, but it was almost dawn, and it did not dare to continue, so it could only pray that they would not discover it too early, so it could absorb for a few more days. While walking out, the hellhound was still very excited. This night's work was enough to top 3 months of recovery outside. It had simply made a profit. That fellow Dole was really a lucky star, no, a super lucky star. Returning the same way did not take too much time. By the time it crossed the city wall and quietly returned to the room, Dole had not even woken up yet. Looking at the sleeping Dole, the hellhound, Aoduo, lay in its dirty dog, slowly refining elemental energy. It wondered if it should help Dole with something. What future could the mine have? His aptitude was not bad, perhaps it should guide him to enter the world of professions? As soon as it thought of this, Aoduo hesitated. The world of professions was good, allowing one to pursue truth, gain powerful strength, and dominate everything, but it was a world full of terror, killing, and conspiracy. A slight carelessness could lead to eternal doom, just like itself, which could die at any time. If it brought him onto this path, it could cause immeasurable consequences. The human race is a very hard-working and talented race. Most humans have aptitude, but only a few can become high-ranking professionals, and very few can become respected warriors or terrifying wizards. This is the result of the human race's upper echelons controlling things. The world is like this, never shifting according to human will. With the life Dole is living now, becoming a professional should make things much better, right? Aoduo was no longer the hellhound it used to be. It had now learned to think like a human, to think about more problems. After dying once, it finally understood what those old seniors had said before. This world is a world where the big fish eats the small fish. Just at this moment, it saw Dole's body twitch slightly, and quickly pretended to be asleep, as he was about to wake up. A moment later, Dole woke up, then washed up, and then went out. Another day began. Dole felt that he was full of strength again today. The muscles on his body seemed to have grown bigger, and he was full of inexhaustible strength. This was something unimaginable before. Dole's biggest wish was the same as most young people's, which was to become a warrior or a knight, holding a sharp long-handled sword, a thick shield, and riding a tall and mighty white horse, which all looked very majestic. Of course, this was just a thought. Only the children of the rich and the children of nobles could become such people. It was impossible for him, and it was unlikely for the people around him. Even a child like Aoduo was unlikely to become a high-ranking knight. Dole usually didn't think about these things because he saw 2 knights at the city gate when he left the city, and he felt a little envious. Knights are different from ordinary soldiers. Knights have special powers, while soldiers are like them, ordinary people, only possessing some fighting skills. Whether it's knights, warriors, or wizards, they are all high-ranking people, beyond Dole's reach. These 2 knights were wearing white, bright silver full-body armor, wrapping themselves tightly, riding on very tall horses, seemingly waiting for someone. Dole just glanced a few more times, then withdrew his gaze, his heart full of envy. At this time, a large number of people had already begun to walk out of the city gate. They went out from the city gate and poured into the surrounding mines, starting a day's work. Passing through the market, Dole spent a copper plate to buy 3 vegetable buns, eating them as he walked. Soon, he saw Big Brother Duodu. The 2 smiled at each other and easily stepped into the mine. Today was the same as usual, breaking down ore and screening for gold, which made Dole very happy, because this proved that he had 2 more copper plates in his account. However, with the increase in strength, he began to have another kind of emotion in his mind, which was why should he be robbed by Aoduo and the others? What right did they have to rob him? Although those people had taken a few days of martial arts classes, their strength was not as good as his. As long as he caught them off guard, he could easily defeat them. He was robbed every day, starving like Aoduo. What right did they have? Was it just because their fathers were in charge? Dole had some unusual emotions in his mind, and this emotion was slowly fermenting in his heart. Smashing stones and screening for gold, a morning passed quickly, but Dole discovered that there were much fewer white, shiny little stones today. After a morning passed, there were only 3 or 4 little stones. The quantity was far less than yesterday. A small stone was about the size of a little fingernail. How many were 3 or 4? However, he did feel that these little stones were becoming more and more intimate, as if they had some great use. This feeling was very strange and magical. Thinking of Aoduo eating hundreds of these stones yesterday afternoon, he felt a little strange in his heart. Could it be that dog Aoduo is not an ordinary dog? Thinking of this, Dole felt that there were many fantasies in his mind. Those books he had read, those stories he had heard, one magical idea after another popped up from his heart. His hands were not slow, and he completed his work according to his usual progress. By the time he got off work, there were only a dozen white crystalline ores in his pocket. He had many things on his mind, but he still gave the extra 2 copper plates to Duoduo as agreed, so that he could take them out, otherwise Aoduo would come to rob him later. Aoduo was not just robbing him. Like him, there were several other children who were alone and helpless. He would rob them all, every day. Whoever resisted, he would beat. Those children did not dare to resist too much, fearing injury. If they did not come to work the next day, it would not just be a matter of injury, they would starve to death. Someone had resisted before, was beaten half to death, and then did not go to work for a few days, and starved to death. This was a typical example. Chapter 5. Moreover, Aoduo did it okay, he never took everything, always leaving a few copper coins for living expenses. Otherwise, even if others didn't deal with him, the mine's people would. When Duolei arrived at the entrance of the mine, he saw Aoduo robbing someone. Aoduo looked up and saw him, and charged over menacingly. Seeing this, Duolei thought to himself that things were bad. Usually, he would stand still and let Aoduo rob him, but today, for some reason, he felt extremely resistant to Aoduo. Seeing Aoduo pouncing, a hint of ruthlessness flashed in Duolei's eyes. Should he give him a severe beating? But the other side had 5 people, he definitely couldn't win. At this moment, he saw that only Aoduo was charging over, his 4 companions were still robbing others. His eyes narrowed, and a dangerous glint appeared. Old scores and new grudges, let's settle them today. Thinking this, he saw Aoduo coming over, relaxed his body, seemingly trembling as he waited to be robbed, but his feet formed a figure 8 stance, ready to exert force at any time. Aoduo rushed towards Duolei, shouting as he ran, "Good, Duolei, you've even learned to hide money. You clearly had 2 extra copper coins yesterday, hand them over." He reached out, his left hand grabbing for Duolei's collar, his right hand already habitually slapping towards Duolei's face. Already prepared to resist, how could Duolei give him the chance? Although he had been working hard all day, he still had some strength. Seeing Aoduo's stance, which clearly didn't take him seriously, a ruthless look flashed in his eyes. He squatted down slightly, dodging Aoduo's left hand, and then his long prepared right fist struck out, from bottom to top, straight at Aoduo's face. This time, he used almost all of his strength, and it had been planned for a long time. Almost without any accidents, everything happened according to the script. It was as if Aoduo had offered his face for this punch, hitting him directly. Aoduo never expected Duolei to resist. He didn't even have time to react before his vision blurred, and he saw a fist landing on his face. He felt a heavy blow to his face, right in the center. The immense force sent him tumbling backward. Bang! Aoduo fell to the ground, unable to get up. The surrounding people were shocked to see this. Aoduo had been beaten? Seeing Aoduo knocked over, Duolei immediately went over and stomped on him, stomping on Aoduo's face 3 or 4 times. Soon, Aoduo's face was a mix of red and blue. After finishing, Duolei quickly left the scene, seeing that the others hadn't reacted yet. This happened in a flash. Aoduo's companions were still beating others when Aoduo himself had already fallen to the ground. They didn't react at all. By the time they saw what happened, Duolei had already slipped away, disappearing into the crowd. He quietly slipped back to the market. Uncle Duoduo had been waiting for a while. The uncle didn't know what had happened and went home after giving the copper coins to Duolei. Today was the same as yesterday. Duolei bought 6 vegetable buns in one go and ate 4 himself. This feeling was so wonderful. He knew that if he wanted to keep his money safe every day, he had to think of a way to give Aoduo a severe beating so that he wouldn't dare to trouble him again. He beat Aoduo today, so he would definitely come back for revenge tomorrow, or get his father to take revenge on him. Alas, he was still rash today, but beating Aoduo really felt good, he had settled part of his previous grudges. Somewhat pleased, he entered the city and returned to his small dwelling. Opening the door, the dog Aoduo stretched out his head, shamelessly sticking out his tongue and licking Duolei's hand, wagging its tail wildly, with none of the dignity of a hellhound. At this moment, Duolei lowered his head, held the hellhound in front of him, and saw that it was indeed fine, so he was relieved. Eating that shiny stone really didn't cause any problems. Standing at the door, Duolei thought for a while and took out the magic crystal from his pocket, holding it in his hand, preparing to give it to Aoduo. Since it liked this thing so much, he would give it more. However, this time, he saw Aoduo looking disgusted, turning its head away. Duolei blinked, wondering what was going on. Yesterday, it was like a hungry ghost, why was it like this today? He was a little confused, but at this moment, Aoduo suddenly bit his clothes, pulling him to the side of the doghouse. Aoduo was very strong, Duolei couldn't resist and was pulled to the side of the doghouse. Only then did Duolei see that there were several books with badly torn covers next to the doghouse. Books were rare in Doman City, only nobles or wealthy merchants could read them. People like Duolei would at most study for 3 years before being sent back. Duolei could read, so he could tell what was written on them. What was wrong with this dog? Why did it bring the books over? Could it be that its previous owner was a book lover? Faced with Aoduo's unusual behavior, Duolei was puzzled. Where did these books come from? Duolei asked Aoduo, pointing at the books. At this moment, Aoduo sat in front of its simple, dilapidated doghouse, pretending not to understand, squatting obediently on the ground like any other dog, sticking out its tongue and panting, looking somewhat silly and cute. Feeling a little ashamed, it lowered its head and lay on the ground. Duolei didn't expect Aoduo to answer, it would be strange if it could. He just felt a little inexplicable. He picked up a book and looked at it in his hand. Aoduo was surprised to see him pick up that particular book. It wasn't just any book, it was the one it most wanted Duolei to see, the Warrior Enlightenment Reader, the legendary path of the Neri magic warrior. This book was not only an autobiography of a legendary figure, but also a basic entry-level guide for warriors. It detailed the legendary figure Neri's journey from scratch, cultivating body techniques, meditation, martial arts, and magic. It contained detailed explanations of basic magic and basic martial arts, making it very suitable for beginners. However, this was a basic introduction for magic warriors, covering both mages and warriors. Generally speaking, a person could practice both at a low level, but at a high level, they could only choose one to strengthen, as a person's energy was limited. In the current occupational system of humans, at a low level, they were required to choose only one, either a warrior, a wizard, or something else. Only one could be chosen. This introductory reader by Neri was probably left over from hundreds of years ago. At that time, magic warriors were everywhere, unlike now, where there were either mages or warriors. People who cultivated both magic and martial arts were very rare. These books were not stolen, they were the most garbage human books in its collection over the past few hundred years, but now it seemed that they were the best books for Duolei. At this moment, Duolei had already seen that this book was slightly more colorful than all the other books. He could vaguely recognize a few words on the cover. He had only attended enlightenment classes for 3 years and didn't know many words. To fully recognize them, he would have to buy a dictionary. Thinking this, he felt a little strange. Had this dog become a high-level magical beast? How could it steal books? Opening the first page, Duolei only recognized half of the words. It was difficult to read, but guessing from the context, it seemed to be introducing a person's great achievements and history. This person named Chi was very powerful and great. He only remembered that when his parents were still alive, he had learned in school textbooks that a person named Neri was very powerful. Could it be him? If it was him, this book would be very interesting. Duolei didn't look at the other books. They were all here anyway and wouldn't run away. He would look at this one first. Chapter 6. For 5 pages in a row, it introduced the great achievements of this man named Neri, and it became more and more exaggerated. In the end, this person was simply a savior-like figure. At this moment, Dole finally remembered that this was the human race's god of war, Neri. Then, this book? He flipped it over, looked at the title, and his mind buzzed. This book was an enlightenment reading that circulated among humans hundreds of years ago. Whether it was a warrior or a magician, they all had a common name a long time ago, Psion. However, no one calls them that anymore. Warriors are called warriors, knights are called knights, and wizards are called wizards. Only when they are together are they called Psions. When I was in school, the teacher often bragged about this kind of thing. Seeing this book, Dole knew that he had found a treasure. He turned his head and looked at Aoduo, only to see that he had quietly finished his vegetable bun and was sitting there quietly, looking at him. At this time, Aoduo got up, came to Dole's side, lay down, and continued to lick his hand. Dog Aoduo was actually thinking at this moment, damn it, I am a dignified abyss demon dog, and I actually have to work hard to imitate a real dog, trying to please a human. If other demon dogs find out, what will become of my dog face? Alas! But seeing Dole like this, it seems he knows what this book is. The effect is not bad. Looking at his shocked little eyes, looking at his shocked expression, it's really great. Dog Aoduo felt happy, as if he had done something amazing, and his dog eyes curved into crescents. However, it was almost dark at this time, and the weather was terribly dark. Although Dole had countless questions in his mind, he couldn't do anything at this time. As for taking the book outside, he didn't dare. If those nobles or warriors saw it, he would probably be killed immediately. Thinking of this, he felt a chill in his heart. Where did this dog get this book? This book hasn't been seen for hundreds of years. How can anyone still have it now? Could it be from a noble family in Doman City? In Doman City, those who are qualified and capable of practicing martial arts are nobles and wealthy families. The families that can collect books from hundreds of years ago are the City Lord Link's family and the Deputy City Lord O'Neill's family. Only they have a long heritage and may collect such books. But neither the City Lord's family nor the O'Neill family has high-level wizards. They only have warriors. Now that I think about it, this book has another origin. The weather slowly turned dark, and then nothing could be seen in the room. Dole gave up the idea of continuing to read. As for lamps, there were few in the entire slum. Even if there were, it wouldn't be for reading, but for work. He remembered that Aunt Annie's house had an oil lamp, but it was only used at night to sew clothes for the nobles, and she couldn't bear to use it at other times. The poor people in the slums are very poor. Most people often can't afford clothes, let alone buy oil lamps to read at night. This is something ordinary people can't imagine. In their opinion, working is what they should do. Reading is something that only nobles and rich people can do. They are not worthy. Thinking of this, Dole felt a strange feeling in his heart. Why can they, but I can't? This is unfair. Thinking of this, Dole's mind became active. He got up, came to the head of the bed, which was in front of Aoduo's doghouse, hugged all the other books he had stolen in his arms, and then placed them under his pillow. He would read all these books, no matter where Aoduo stole them from, and he would read them carefully. With this thought, he quickly fell into a deep sleep. In the dark night, Aoduo's eyes emitted a bright light. Watching Dole fall asleep, it slowly stood up, its tail no longer wagging, and its body straight. Looking outside, it was just dark, and there were still people walking around. He suppressed his mood and slowly sat down. Magic crystals are good things, full of various energy elements. As long as there are enough energy elements, he can recover quickly. However, the magic crystals in the mine that Dole went to were only a little bit, and he estimated that he would absorb them in 3 to 5 days, but it was better than nothing. After a day, he felt that his injuries had improved a lot, no longer like before. This was all thanks to the magic crystal mine trip last night. It would be great if there was a small magic crystal mine. Thinking of this, Aoduo looked outside, hoping that time would pass quickly. An hour passed. Around 10 o'clock in the evening, Dog Aoduo slowly stood up, came to Dole's side, gave him a magic aura as usual, then retreated to the door, and looked outside. At this time, the slum was already dead silent, except for some drunkards, no one was out and about. Seeing this, he quietly opened the door and quickly slipped out, soon arriving outside the city. The mine was the same as yesterday, with only some traces of the work done during the day. Aoduo came here and found that there were some changes today compared to yesterday. This mine had been mined a little. There was no one in the mine at night. It was quiet, with only the sounds of some insects. In the quiet mountains, only stones accompanied him. Aoduo did not relax his vigilance. He carefully strolled around, and when he was sure that there was no one, he relaxed. He released his mental power, went deep underground, and began his day's work. Absorbing the mine. No, it was absorbing the tiny energy elements in the veins. If he was in the city, he could only swallow the magic crystal mine into his stomach and then slowly absorb it, otherwise, the magical fluctuations would easily attract other people, but here, without anyone around, he could absorb it swaggeringly. Soon, another night passed, and as dawn approached, he quietly slipped back into the city. After a night of absorption, he felt that his injuries had recovered a bit, and he was very happy. Quietly slipping back to his doghouse, Dog Aoduo breathed a sigh of relief. In fact, he himself knew that there was no decent power in this city, at most only level 1. With his current level 2 strength, he could come and go freely. But it's always better to be careful, this is a human proverb, and he deeply understands this principle. Pretending to lie down, about half an hour passed, and Dole woke up. As yesterday, Dole repeated all the previous actions, met Uncle Dodo at the market, and then walked towards the mine. He still remembered yesterday's events, so he quietly observed his surroundings at the entrance and didn't see Aoduo, so he felt relieved. Uncle Dodo saw that Dole was a little strange. When he entered the riverside, he finally couldn't help but ask, "Dole, why are you being so sneaky?" Dole shrugged and said, "I beat Aoduo yesterday." Dodo was immediately taken aback, looked around vigilantly, didn't see Aoduo or his father, breathed a sigh of relief, and at the same time, he said in shock to Dole, "What's wrong with you? Why did you beat Aoduo?" Dole said, "I'm hungry. I need to eat my fill to have the strength to work. 2 vegetable buns a night are not enough. I also want to eat meat. Aoduo stole my money. It was okay before, but it's not okay now." Chapter 7. Dodo sighed and said, "Then be careful. Aoduo is very petty. Be careful he gets someone to beat you up. His father is Sam, the supervisor. He can ask a martial arts instructor to help. Be careful." Dole also sighed at this time and said, "I will be careful. If he comes later, I will run. At worst, I won't work here anymore." The Bianchi mine is one of the few mines in Doman City with an average scale, but the treatment here is good, including 2 meals. Generally, people don't want to leave, but if someone keeps making trouble, Dole will have to leave. Today's task is still washing gold ore. In addition to gold ore, they also discovered another precious metal, which is silver ore. However, according to regulations, the 2 of them honestly sorted out this ore without hiding any of it, and placed it on the river bank, waiting for someone to collect it. When eating in the morning, the foreman came to collect the ore. Although there was one more type of ore, the foreman didn't say anything and took it all away. Someone would handle it specially later. However, at this time, Dole discovered that only half of the vegetable cake left for him was left. There were originally 2, but now there was only 1 left, and his face suddenly darkened. "So, this is what was waiting for me. Supervisor Lime is really protecting his son." Seeing this, Dodo also sighed, but he didn't share his vegetable cake with Dole. Instead, he ate his own. Dole didn't care and took out the vegetable cake he had bought extra in the morning. "Fortunately, I was prepared and bought an extra copper coin's worth of vegetable cake when I came. Vegetable cakes and rice balls are different. Most of the rice balls are dough, which contains a lot of energy for the human body to consume, while most of the vegetable cakes are vegetables, which don't have much energy, but can fill you up. However, if you do heavy physical activity, you will get hungry very quickly." Dole even wondered if he would starve to death if this continued. If it's like this at noon and in the afternoon, he will have to consider whether or not to continue working here. If you don't have enough to eat, how can you have the strength to work? Over time, you'll lose out. This is what the master who taught them elementary martial arts skills said back then. People must have strength and must eat their fill, and eat meat. If you don't eat your fill and don't eat meat, you won't amount to anything in this life. Although Dole came from the slums, there is a rule in the Northern Kingdom that before the age of 10, you must undergo 3 months of martial arts training and 3 years of cultural courses, so Dole was able to master a little bit of martial arts skills and some writing. He sighed and continued working. Dole and Dodo are partners, but their wages differ by 3 times. Dole is still a child, and his daily workload is limited. Moreover, most of the time, he assists Dodo and doesn't need to use too much strength. Seeing this, Dodo is also a little depressed. If Dole is driven away, who will partner with him is also a problem. At noon and in the afternoon, as Dole expected, the supplies were indeed reduced. How could he work if he didn't have enough to eat? Moreover, in the afternoon, Dole was stared at fiercely by the foreman. As long as he dared to stop, he would probably be whipped immediately. Looking at the foreman who was watching him intently, Dole knew that he couldn't stay in this place anymore. However, the amazing thing was that he didn't lose much strength even though he didn't eat much. It was really strange. The whole day, he didn't give the foreman a chance to whip him. The mine rarely deducts workers' wages, even if there is a conflict with the supervisor. This is because it will cause resistance from other workers, and the supervisor will not be able to continue working. For the mine owner, the supervisor is not important. The mine relies on these workers. In the afternoon, the two went to collect their wages together. Dodo and Dole smiled at each other after receiving their money and walked out together. However, when going out, Dole conveniently grabbed a wooden stick at the door and held it in his hand. At the entrance of the mine, Ayaduo's face was covered with gauze, wrapping his entire nose, looking a little miserable. Not only his nose, but the face near his nose was also bruised. Next to him, 4 young hooligans were standing around with sticks in their hands, staring at the entrance. They didn't dare to stand directly at the gate, but guarded not far from the gate. At this moment, one of them shouted, "Boss Ayaduo, it's Dole, he's out." Ayaduo naturally saw Dole too, with a fierce expression. He didn't pay attention yesterday and was punched. Today he starved him for a day. Let's see if he dares to be arrogant tonight. The surrounding people stepped aside when they saw this. For adults, this is just a child's fight, just watch the fun. But when it comes to the affairs of the supervisor, no one wants to get involved, or even watch, and quickly leave. Dodo stood next to Dole, sighed and said, "Dole, be careful." At this moment, he saw the stick behind Dole and didn't speak. He knew that after today, he might not see Dole again. He looked like things wouldn't go well for him today. Dole nodded, a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth, and didn't speak. The two walked out of the gate. Uncle Dodo quickly left Dole, and Dole walked forward along the crowd as if nothing had happened. Ayaduo and 4 big men were already standing at the door, just waiting for Dole to come out. The sticks in their hands were tapping up and down on their palms, slowly approaching. Usually, Dole would definitely walk slowly at this time, waiting for them to come up and rob him. After robbing him, they would leave to rob others. But today, Dole was determined not to let them succeed, so naturally he wouldn't wait for them to come over foolishly. As soon as he left the mine, Dole deliberately stood on the outer side of the crowd and suddenly ran forward along the crowd at a very fast speed. Chase! When Ayaduo saw this, his nose hurt with anger, his face flushed red, and he waved his hand and ran over immediately. However, Dole was on the other side of the crowd. They had to go through the crowd to catch up with Dole. Dole worked all year round. Although he trained his upper body, his running speed was also very fast. As soon as he rushed out, he was like a wild horse that had broken free from its reins, galloping all the way down the road out of the mountain. From the mine down to Doman City, it was about 7 or 8 miles to the city gate. In front of the city gate was a scattered market. Dole ran while looking back. At first, he could still see Ayaduo's fierce gaze, but later, Ayaduo's speed couldn't keep up with him. They didn't have horses and couldn't catch up at all. Seeing this, Dole stopped by the side of the road, hunched over, put his hands on his knees, and gasped for breath. After calming down, he thought that today's matter was over, but what about tomorrow? He sighed in his heart. After catching his breath, Dole walked towards the market alone along the official road. This time, he bought 3 extra copper coins worth of rice balls because he wouldn't be able to work tomorrow. Back home, the hell demon dog Ayaduo poked its head out from inside, looked left and right, and licked Dole's palm a few times. After Dole came in, it obediently waited for Dole to feed it. Although rice balls are not the hell demon dog's staple food, it has gotten used to eating them these days. Oh, not bad, 3 vegetable cakes today. Is Dole rich? Chapter 8. Ayaduo quickly sensed that something was wrong because Dore seemed to be in a bad mood after returning. He didn't know what had happened, so he could only stand in front of Dore, wagging his tail to show his confusion. Dore looked at Ayaduo, his young face filled with the vicissitudes of a man in his 40s, and sighed, saying to Ayaduo, eat today, because there won't be much to eat tomorrow. Damn Ayaduo, I must discipline you. The hellhound Ayaduo immediately understood that Dore had probably offended the young man who often robbed him, resulting in the loss of his job. The hellhound immediately came up with an idea. He quickly ran to Dore's bedside, used his claws to dig through the pillow and ragged old clothes, found the book that Dore had been reading yesterday, and held it in front of him. If this little thing could learn even a little bit from the book and become a warrior, he wouldn't have to worry about food and clothing. Dore was just grumbling a few words and didn't expect Ayaduo to be able to help him. Just then, he sensed Ayaduo's abnormality. It was actually holding the book he had been reading yesterday. What did this mean? This book was indeed a good book. If he could master it, he would definitely have a future. But he was about to run out of food and starve to death, so what was the use of reading this book? Having run all the way back today, it wasn't even dark yet, so he could still read a few pages. Dore didn't dwell on Ayaduo's abnormality. He took the book from Ayaduo's mouth, walked to the bed, lay down lazily, adjusted to a more comfortable position, and continued reading from where he had left off yesterday. Nalvi, as a legendary magic warrior, had a lot of introductions in the beginning, including his abilities, achievements, way of thinking, contributions to the human race, and final achievements. Even after hundreds of years, Dore had heard of this name. After seeing his historical achievements, he was actually a little excited. Human war god, legendary magician, legendary magic warrior, these titles on one person's head were unimaginable. One must know that in the modern world, an empire having such a strong person was already considered remarkable. In the entire Northern Kingdom, only the legendary magician Ayagia possessed this title, shouldering the most important power of the Northern Kingdom, and was the idol, dream lover, or object of pursuit for countless people. Dore was excited, but it was only excitement. Whether it was Nalvi or the legendary magician Ayagia, they were both unattainable existences. It was enough to just look at them. Turning to a new page, a line of words appeared on the book, Elementary Body Refining Technique. Below was a row of words introducing the origin, creator, and historical modifications of the elementary body refining technique, but these words had already begun to blur. Dore didn't recognize many words to begin with, and now he was completely lost. He skipped these words and looked down. First item, War Stance. The book had a picture, labeled as 1, which was a person sitting cross-legged on the bed, with their hands clasped in front of their chest and their legs in a strange position, crossed on the ground, looking very strange. After carefully examining the posture, Dore got up from the bed and carefully imitated it. He could barely do it, but his legs were very sore and numb, and he couldn't hold it for long. He played with it for a while and continued to look down, while below the picture was an introduction to the effect of this posture. Calming the mind, focusing the heart, strengthening willpower, adjusting body posture, adjusting bone development, and other effects, while preparing for the next posture. Dore became interested when he saw this, and after looking at the introduction below, he realized that this was a posture that needed to be maintained for a long time, so he started doing it according to the requirements. The movement wasn't difficult, and he could do it with a little effort, but it was difficult to maintain. Dore did it for a while and felt his legs so numb that they were about to give out, so he relaxed. After memorizing all the key points, he picked up the book again to look at the next posture. The next posture was a standing posture, with the front and rear feet separated in a figure 8 shape, with the hands one in front and one behind. The front hand was a palm, and the rear hand was a fist, with the elbows hanging down, like a person standing on the ground ready to punch. However, this posture had many key points, slightly hunching the back, the fist and palm seemingly ready to strike, which was a very interesting movement. Dore looked at it a few times, memorized the key points, then put down the book, got up from the bed, and followed along. The movements were not difficult, and the key points were very simple, but there was only one thing, which was that it was difficult to persist. Like the sitting posture, standing for 3 to 5 minutes made his shoulders and thighs sore. However, this aroused Dore's interest even more. He had been in the mine for the past few years, practicing hammering every day, and his body had already developed very well. Standing in this posture could actually make him feel tired, which obviously meant that this movement had benefits. He stood for a while, sat for a while, and soon it was dark. The people in the slums were very quiet. After dark, except for some people talking softly, no sound could be heard. It was very poor here, so poor that even rats and stray dogs wouldn't come, let alone thieves. Thieves would probably starve to death in the slums. The people in the slums were very numb and rarely communicated with each other. At 9 o'clock in the evening, just as Dore was practicing with great enthusiasm, Ayaduo, who was sitting in the doghouse admiring Dore's boxing, suddenly turned his head and stood up from the ground. Dore was also startled by Ayaduo's movement. Seeing Ayaduo looking towards the door, Dore became vigilant. He subconsciously asked, someone. Aoduo nodded slightly, then raised his head again. It wasn't afraid of someone coming over. After absorbing the mineral veins for 2 days, its strength had now recovered to around level 2. As long as it wasn't above level 2, it could make them regret coming. Dore was stunned by Aoduo's human-like behavior. He carefully came to the door and pricked up his ears, listening to the movement outside. Soon, he heard several footsteps approaching rapidly towards his side. Dore didn't know if the owners of these footsteps were coming towards him, because he had offended that bastard Aoduo during the day. If it was him, then it would be troublesome. He looked at the dog Aoduo and turned his gaze to the window, and immediately had an idea. Quietly coming to the window and opening it, Dore first quietly jumped out, then signaled the dog Aoduo to jump out. Aoduo naturally followed suit, jumping out from inside. Then, the man and the dog stood under the window, pricking up their ears as high as they could, listening to the movement outside, looking very comical. The owners of those footsteps quickly came to Dore's door. After only stopping for less than a second, Dore heard the sound of the door being kicked open. Immediately, a firelight lit up, someone had lit a torch, and then an angry voice rang out. "No one's here." That guy ran away. It was Aoduo's voice. Dore was slightly startled, it seemed that he couldn't stay here. Perhaps the sound of kicking the door was too loud, and the sound of doors opening rang out on the dark streets of the slums, all looking towards this side. Dore's home was very simple, with only a small room, a table, and the remaining bedding. Everything was clear at a glance. Not finding Dore, Aoduo didn't want to cause more trouble. The situation in the slums was complicated. If he were to cause trouble for Dore, no one would probably stop him. But if he were to cause trouble here, it would probably be very troublesome. Chapter 9. Son of a bitch, that mutt runs pretty fast. Otto came quickly and left quickly. He slammed the door shut, not even looking back as he left. He felt incredibly frustrated, and the more he thought about it, the angrier he became. The twisted expression made the wound on his face throb. He lowered his head, concealing his true emotions. The group extinguished their torches and slunk away from the slum. At this moment, the surrounding people began to discuss what had happened, speculating about who Dorlai had offended to have people come knocking at his door in the middle of the night. Voices of discussion echoed in the darkness. Dorlai and Otto remained hidden under the window, not emerging until the surrounding voices had faded away. Only then did they cautiously make their way around to the front door. The door was completely shattered and unusable. Even if it were repaired, it would likely attract Otto's prying eyes in the future. This place was no longer habitable. Dorlai looked at Otto at his feet, sighed, and said, "I have to find another place." Otto, at this moment, didn't know what to say. He opened his mouth, let out a soft whine, and then fell silent. The slums were scarce in everything except empty houses. There were many empty houses around Dorlai, belonging to deceased vagrants or neighbors who had moved elsewhere. Although it was night, Dorlai, having lived here since childhood, found it easy to find a new place to live. Occupied and unoccupied houses were distinguishable, making it easy to tell them apart. After gathering his bedding and books, Dorlai didn't have much furniture. He left without hesitation and quickly found a new place to live. As for the place he had just abandoned, even though he had lived there for 7 or 8 years, Dorlai didn't hesitate for a moment when he moved. After moving, he couldn't stop thinking that Otto hated him so much that the Bianchi mine job was probably completely off the table. He couldn't go there anymore. Without the mine job, he had no source of income. Dorlai felt like he had fallen into hell. He only had 3 copper coins left, and even if he made it through tomorrow, he would starve to death the day after. "Otto, you're going to die by my hands sooner or later," Dorlai thought fiercely. He now valued the book The Legendary Journey of Neri the Magic Warrior even more. As long as he could become a warrior, the first thing he would do was kill Otto. The new place was almost identical to the old one, except it was filled with dust. With mines surrounding Doman County, dust was normal. It was late at night, and Dorlai wasn't too particular. He simply spread his bedding on the dilapidated wooden planks and prepared Otto's doghouse before getting ready to practice his sitting posture. Although the techniques from hundreds of years ago were outdated, they were the only martial arts knowledge he could currently learn, so he had to practice diligently. Dorlai thought to himself. Soon, the night passed. The next morning, Dorlai woke up from his sleep and found that his legs were sore and numb, as if his blood wasn't flowing properly. Last night, he had stubbornly maintained the posture all night, and now he felt like his legs didn't belong to him. He groaned in pain and then straightened his legs, vigorously pounding them with his hands. It took a long time to get rid of the soreness and numbness. Feeling like he was okay again, Dorothy looked at where Otto was supposed to be and was immediately shocked. Otto was gone. Just then, the door opened, and Otto's sneaky head peeked in from outside. Seeing that Dorothy was awake, he immediately trotted over, wagging his tail, and licked his face. Feeling Otto's enthusiasm, Dorothy breathed a sigh of relief. As long as he didn't run around, it would be fine. He patted the dog's head and said, "Be good and stay home. Don't run around, or you'll end up as dog meat on someone's table." He had to go to another mine today and apply in advance. Doman County was surrounded by mines, and there were many workers. Every morning, people who worked in the mines would leave through the city gate, flooding into the various mines like a tide. The mines only worried about having too few people, not too many. Although Doman County was poor, it had a large population, all people from various places trying to make a living. Moreover, the mine salaries were stable, and the miners' lives were generally secure. Of course, this didn't apply to pitiful children like Dorothy, who had no parents and were easily bullied. Dorothy arrived at the city gate, looked at the recruitment notices around, randomly chose one, and ran to the recruitment location to apply. With his years of experience at the Bianchi mine, the supervisor easily approved his application. Just like that, Dorothy found a job again and happily went to work. This mine was called Chrysalis. The person leading Dorothy was a seemingly refined supervisor who assigned him a partner and then left. The new partner was a middle-aged man with a rather weathered face. The muscles on his exposed arms were bulging, making him look strong. After the supervisor assigned the tasks, he left. And so, a new day began. The new partner didn't like to talk, only liked to work. Dorothy had no choice but to keep up. Fortunately, although he hadn't slept properly all night, he was energetic. By the end of the day, he was keeping up with the energetic middle-aged man, Ob, which impressed Ob. However, the Chrysalis mine didn't provide food. Dorothy was hungry all day and almost fainted when he got off work. Although there was no food, the wages at Chrysalis were 3 copper coins higher than at Bianchi. Since his original salary was 6 copper coins a day, he could earn 9 copper coins a day, 4 more than at the Bianchi mine. Overall, it was still worth it, but he had to bring his own lunch and dinner. Returning to the market, he had a hearty meal and felt a bit stuffed. Not daring to linger outside for fear of being found by Otto, he bought food for the dog Otto and quickly returned to his small nest. The legendary journey of Neri only covered the first 2 postures. Next was basic fist techniques. Basic fist techniques had been standardized thousands of years ago. Dorothy had learned them long ago, so there was nothing to learn. After flipping through the contents, he found nothing new or informative, so he skipped it and looked at the next section. Legendary magic warrior Neri practiced both magic and martial arts. Dorothy opened the following pages and immediately saw 3 large characters, meditation technique. He was immediately excited. This was something only wizards could learn. He carefully looked down, but then felt somewhat deflated. He didn't recognize many of the characters. How could he learn it? Sighing, Dorothy skipped this section, thinking that he should quickly save up money to buy a book. Now that he earned 9 copper coins a day, he could probably save 2 copper coins a day. A dictionary cost about 50 copper coins, so he could save enough in about a month. Thinking of this, he felt somewhat helpless. However, after turning the page, it was about martial arts again. This time, it was a true fist technique, and Dorothy's spirits immediately lifted. Cross fist, low-level fist technique. He first schemed through it. This fist technique had a total of 12 moves. Most of the moves were extended versions of basic fist techniques. The fist technique was mostly focused on defense, with only 1 or 2 purely offensive moves. The core principle of this fist technique was the cross block, hand cross block, elbow cross block, shoulder elbow cross block, elbow back cross block, leg cross block, foot cross block. It seemed to maximize defense, while the 2 offensive fist techniques were the cross thrust punch and the cross cannon punch, which looked quite powerful. Chapter 10. Seeing this, Doray's spirit lifted. He had practiced basic boxing, and although he couldn't grasp this set of cross fist techniques at a glance, he could figure out the main ideas of the person who designed the fist techniques. Although it was a fist technique mainly focused on defense, Any fist technique was something you couldn't learn outside without spending money, and he felt like he had found a treasure. Thinking of this, he carefully read the fist techniques again, earnestly memorizing them, including the fist techniques, key points of the movements, precautions, and so on. He read very carefully, memorizing and practicing at the same time. Otto lay in the doghouse, watching Dore practicing, and felt relieved. He had finally guided this kid onto the right path. As long as he was willing to practice, and with his magical conditioning at night, it shouldn't take long to reach the apprentice level. Once he reached the apprentice level, he could find a decent job and wouldn't have to work in the mines. He had been wandering around the mines these past few nights, and after seeing the environment of the mines, he sighed slightly in his heart. This was just a place to survive, not a place to make money. Moreover, Dore was still young, and his salary was just enough for one person to spend, not even enough to get sick. How could such a life work? As his benefactor, Otto felt it was necessary to improve his life. Fortunately, Dore was not the kind of person who couldn't be helped. He also knew how to improve, and with a little thought, this guy got on the right track himself, which was not bad. I'll go look again tonight to see if there are any small veins of magic crystal mines in other places. Absorbing it is so enjoyable, I feel like I'm getting addicted. Awoo, 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 this kind of life is really great. Changing to a different mine was not as worrying as Dore had imagined. The salary was actually higher, and his body was also getting better. As long as the salary was enough, life was even better than before, and he didn't feel as scared as before. As for that damned Otto, Dore thought that as long as he avoided him, he wouldn't have to be afraid at all. Now he was just afraid that someone would inform on him and leak his whereabouts. With Otto's meticulous and vengeful nature, he probably wouldn't get any benefits. However, soon, 5 or 6 days passed, and Otto didn't find Dore. On the contrary, Dore's cross-fist techniques went from being unfamiliar at the beginning to being proficient now. Life seemed to be developing in a good direction. On February 1st, Dore was awakened by the sound of raindrops falling on the awning. Hearing this sound, he jumped out of bed and went to the window to look out. In the still dark morning, large raindrops fell from the sky, forming puddles on the ground. Where there were many puddles, the water overflowed and flowed into small ditches, and the sound of gurgling water poured into his ears. It's raining, damn it, I can't go to work today. Rain meant that he wouldn't be able to work for 2 or 3 days, and he would have to live off his savings. At 3 copper coins a day, he would need at least 10 copper coins. Dore felt a wail in his heart when he thought of this. It was hard enough to save 13 copper coins, and now it was all gone. Even God was against him. Thinking of this, a look of sorrow appeared on his face. He felt like he had been busy for nothing these past few days. He could still endure the rain in the past, but now that he was learning boxing, he needed a lot of food every day. How could he endure this? Sighing, Dore lay back on the bed, wondering what to do on a rainy day. He couldn't just sit and do nothing. If he really lay around for 3 or 5 days, he wouldn't be able to buy that dictionary. It was really a dilemma. Thinking of this, Dore sat cross-legged on the bed, sitting until dawn. He was now used to the sitting posture. His legs would go numb and then not numb. After sitting for a while, he felt his whole body relax, which was also very beneficial for rest. After practicing the exercises for a long time, Dore didn't feel very sleepy. His whole body was full of energy, but there was one drawback: he got hungry easily. Physical development required food, and learning boxing also required food. He didn't have enough money for food in the first place. If he rested for 3 or 5 days without any income, Dore felt like he would go crazy. Thinking about this, he thought until dawn. Just then, a clanging sound startled him. It was the sound of the blacksmith shop hammering iron, which was particularly loud in the early morning. Dore's heart immediately perked up. He could go to the blacksmith shop. With his current physique, he would definitely be able to get a job as a helper. He had applied before, but people dismissed him with a few words, saying that his body was not good enough. Now it would definitely work. Blacksmith shops were also a specialty of Doming City. There were 2 types of blacksmith shops in Doming City, one that forged ore and one that forged various ironware. Blacksmith shops that forged ore were called official shops, meaning that only the government could open them. They collected ore from various mines and refined it themselves, smelting iron ore into iron ingots. This was a unique business. Of course, raw ore didn't necessarily have to be smelted in Doming County. Every year after winter, various merchant teams would also come from outside to collect ore and transport it to other places for smelting. It's just that in Doming County, private smelting was not allowed. And there were many of the second type of blacksmith shop, making various weapons, farm tools, repairing carriages, and forging various odds and ends. There were several of them on the edge of the slums, and they often hired helpers. The salary of a helper was very low, only 3 copper coins a day, but they provided meals all day, which was definitely a good job for Duray. Thinking of this, he put on his tattered clothes, said hello to Otto, pushed open the door, and rushed into the cold rain. Doming City was not big. Relying on the mines, the people of Doming City lived quite well, except for the people in the slums, who had decent lives in other places. Leaving the slums and walking a little further along the street, you would reach the ordinary residential area and commercial area of Doming City. This area was the largest in Doming City. Early in the morning, the clanging sound came from various places, decorating the morning of Doming City. Usually at this time, it was the time for the miners to go to work, and it was very lively with people coming and going, but today it was raining heavily, and there was no one on the street, only a few blacksmith shop workers were still hammering iron under the shed. Duray was also an old hand here. He often wandered around here, knowing which one was cheap, which one was expensive, which one had more work and which one had less. He didn't deliberately want to learn any skills, just worked a few odd jobs, of course, only choosing the one that paid the most. Soon, he came to the door of Old K's blacksmith shop in the rain. At this moment, he was completely soaked, his hair and clothes were full of water, and he quickly came to the side of the stove. The blacksmith also recognized Duray, and while burning the fire, he joked, "It's you kid, why are you here today, aren't you going to the mine? It's raining so hard, how can I go? I'm here today to ask if you need a helper, paid daily, I'll work for a few days." He rolled up his sleeves, revealing his strong shoulders and arms. The blacksmith was stunned for a moment. He was about to mock him, but when he saw Duray's exposed arms, he thought, "Oh ho, there's something there." So he smiled honestly and said, "You wait, I'll go ask Brother Ha." After speaking, he put down the bellows and walked to the back. Old K's blacksmith shop was divided into 2 parts, the front stall and the back workshop. The back workshop was in the back, mainly for the secondary processing and purification of the purchased iron ingots, which was generally not done outside, while the front stall was the place for formal blacksmithing. Chapter 11. The blacksmith didn't spend much time inside, he quickly turned around and came out, followed by a burly middle-aged man in coarse linen clothes. His skin was a shiny, dark black, even his face. He was clearly a blacksmith, but his clothes were quite decent, indicating he hadn't been hammering iron much lately. Dole, who was warming himself by the furnace, immediately stood up when he saw the man, lowered his head, and said, "Hage, hello. I'd like to apply for a job as a helper." Hage came close to Dole and sized him up. He suddenly reached out and patted Dole's shoulder. Dole knew what he was doing, didn't dodge at all, and braced himself, meeting Hage's large hand. Bang! Dole's feet shook, and he was pushed down a bit, but his body remained straight. Hage squeezed Dole's shoulder and smiled, "Kid, not bad. You haven't wasted your time working in the mines for the past 2 years. All right, you'll work with Varik. Do whatever he tells you to do. 4 copper coins a day, is that okay?" "Wow, 1 more copper coin." Dole immediately patted his chest and said, "Okay, okay, okay. Thank you, Hage. Thank you, Hage." Hage looked at Dole's youthful face, thought for a moment, and said, "If you don't want to be a helper and want to be an apprentice, it depends on whether you have the knack for it. Become an apprentice?" Dole's eyes lit up, and he immediately agreed. Although blacksmith apprentices don't get paid, they are different from helpers. They can learn skills from the master and become official blacksmiths in the future. Even registered blacksmiths in the Blacksmiths Guild earn silver coins every month, not copper coins. That would be a huge leap forward. If he could become a blacksmith apprentice, then the dictionary matter could be postponed until later. Hage was just saying it casually. He could tell that Dole didn't want to waste even a day without food, so he was becoming a helper. However, the blacksmith shop also needed people. If Dole wanted to become a blacksmith in the future, his current physique would be sufficient. Of course, physique is physique, whether he can make a living depends on talent and effort, and it doesn't actually have much to do with physique. But physique is the foundation, without it, it won't work. Varik, the blacksmith Dole had spoken to earlier, smiled guilelessly when he saw Hage agree. Varik was a level 2 blacksmith, capable of forging level 2 ironware. He didn't have a helper at the moment and was very happy. Dole's arrival pleased him. Hage said a few words and then left the forge, going to the back, while Dole stayed beside Varik. Varik looked at Dole and said in a muffled voice, "You're a helper for the first time. Let me tell you up front, if you mess things up for me, I'll beat you." Dole naturally nodded quickly, indicating that he would definitely do a good job. Varik was a level 2 blacksmith, solely responsible for one forge. Next to the forge were mold patterns, an anvil, quenching ice water, everything complete. These past 2 days, there weren't enough helpers, and they were all assigned to the level 3 blacksmiths, leaving Varik without a helper, which worried him. Dole's arrival made him very happy. Varik had already lit the fire in the forge and was just waiting for it to burn hotter before starting preparations. At the other forges, people had helpers and had already started forging. Varik was also getting anxious. After agreeing on things, Varik assigned Dole work. The first task was to stoke the fire, add coal to the forge, and pump the bellows to make it burn hotter, while Varik prepared the molds and iron ingots. As a resident of Domian City, Dole had some knowledge of iron ore processing. Newly mined iron ore needed to be screened, then sanded and then processed into pig iron through a forge. Next, the pig iron would be refined to remove more impurities, turning it into wrought iron, and then further refined to become usable steel. To obtain higher grade steel, more processing and techniques were required, eventually turning it into usable steel ingots. Fire played a significant role in this process. In Domian City, besides the charcoal fire used by commoners, the most powerful was the large-scale magic fire used by the government, which was a flame only wizards could use and commoners couldn't touch. For ordinary people, wizards were like sacred beings, usually impossible to approach, let alone magic fire. It was said that it was a flame 10 times more powerful than charcoal fire. Charcoal fire could already melt steel, so how terrifying would magic fire be? While stoking the fire, Dole was lost in thought. Soon, he made the fire burn brightly. Compared to working in the mines, pumping the bellows was a very light task. Varik, who was busy over there, saw Dole diligently stoking the fire and was secretly pleased. He had already brought the iron ingot over and, seeing the flames rise, called Dole to fetch the crucible, preparing to melt the steel ingot. The work wasn't difficult, just tedious. Varik would ask for this and that, and he had to constantly tend to the flames, not letting the furnace fire die down. In a short while, his whole body was roasted red by the flames, and steam was rising from him. Dole worked hard to pump the bellows, making the fire turn red. The iron ingot in the crucible quickly melted, and at this time, Varik had already prepared the mold. Dole wasn't just stoking the fire, he was also observing his surroundings, feeling very curious about all the blacksmith's crafts. The mold was a sand box, the sand inside was very fine and firm. After securing it, a wide broadsword tool was placed inside, pressing an imprint into the sand. After that, the broadsword was removed, the sandbox was closed again, leaving only one end of the sandbox exposed, and placed on the ground. The next process was uneventful. The ordinary iron ingot turned into liquid and was poured into the mold. As a burst of smoke emerged, all the molten iron was poured in. After waiting for a moment, the mold was opened, and the dark broadsword blank was revealed. At this time, the forging would begin. The two cooperated, one stoking the fire and adding coal, the other hammering the blank. A morning passed quickly, and a 9-forged broadsword was freshly baked. Next was the polishing work. Latest new small say is at 69 books bar first post. Dole saw that during the forging process, Varik wasn't just randomly hammering the broadsword, there was a rhythm to it, switching between large and small hammers, constantly observing the broadsword's appearance, center of gravity, etc., all of which were particular. After finishing one sword, Dole felt that he had learned a lot. After finishing, Varik called Dole to eat something. At this time, Varik truly accepted Dole. The young man was strong and capable, not bad, not bad. It was lunchtime, and many people were walking out with food. Dole saw what they were eating, fragrant rice and small pieces of meat. His eyes widened immediately. Seeing Dole's expression, Varik laughed loudly and said, work hard, and if you do well, you can eat this every day. Along the way, many people greeted Varik, and many also saw Dole, a small boy, and gave friendly greetings. This made Dole feel that the blacksmith community was very loving. Chapter 12. The Back Kitchen. The kitchen of Old K's blacksmith shop was a separate large room. Upon entering, one would see a long table. Several basins were placed on the long table. 2 large basins held white flour dumplings and rice, while 2 small plates held large bowls. The remaining items were several pots containing vegetables and meat dishes. However, at this moment, Dole saw that some dishes were for the apprentices and some were for the masters, with specific labels. He looked and felt like crying. He had no meat dishes, only vegetables and rice dumplings. But having rice was already good. After eating vegetable dumplings for several years, he had almost forgotten what rice tasted like. When did he start forgetting? It seemed to be when his parents passed away. Thinking of this, he felt a slight sadness in his heart. Were his parents doing well in heaven? Was it a good place? Alas! Feeling Dole's low mood, Varik patted him on the shoulder and said, "Don't overthink things. Only when you are full do you have the strength to work. Come, eat." He took 2 bowls for Dole and went to the front to get rice first. There was only one chef in the kitchen, and seeing Dole come over, he smiled and said, "A newcomer has arrived. Why do you look a bit familiar?" Dole raised his head and said, "From the slums, living right next to here, used to come here often to play." The chef suddenly remembered something, nodded, and didn't speak. He pointed to the large pot of meat dishes and said, "Since it's your first time, you can take some meat." Dole was immediately grateful. He was practicing martial arts and needed to eat meat, but recently he had been eating only vegetables, and his nutrition couldn't keep up. "There's plenty of rice and dumplings, eat as much as you can, don't worry about not getting enough," Varik said, handing the rice spoon to Dole after filling his own bowl. The eating area was very casual, you could eat anywhere, but generally, the blacksmiths would take it to the forging furnace to watch the fire, preventing the temperature from dropping too low, otherwise, it would take time to start the fire again later. After a good meal, Dole felt extremely happy. Being full was the life of a human. He decided not to go to the mine. He would work here, even if it meant earning 1 copper coin less per day, because he could eat his fill. For Dole now, being able to eat his fill was the most important thing, as it related to whether he could become a qualified warrior in the future. If he could become a warrior, who would want to be a miner? Thinking of this, his mind became active, and he tentatively probed Varik's intentions while eating. Varik wasn't the boss and couldn't say much. He could only talk to him about daily matters. After all, there were many blacksmith shops in Doman City, and they were always short of apprentices. He could only say that as long as Dole came every day, he would definitely have food to eat. Hearing this, Dole was very excited, and he worked harder in the afternoon, which made Varik very pleased. Varik sighed. Children from the slums were easy to please, giving them food made them work so hard. Doman County was located in the north-central part of the Northern Kingdom, geographically leaning towards the north. Although the weather warmed up at the end of winter, it was still cold. It rained for 3 consecutive days, and by the 3rd day, the temperature had dropped to an extreme, feeling like winter had arrived. On the 3rd morning, Dole was awakened by the cold. The blanket he was covered with was as good as nothing, and he shivered all over. Looking at the sky outside that had already brightened, he rubbed his hands and greeted Aldo before heading out. The blacksmith shop was warmer. As for Aldo, there was no need to worry about him, his fur was so thick that the temperature had almost no effect on him. Aldo looked at Dole's departing figure, finding it somewhat amusing. Weak humans. He had been living comfortably these past 2 days. He went to find mineral veins a few nights ago and actually found 2 more. Although it was raining, what did it matter? After absorbing the magic crystals, he could also conveniently eat some wild game in the mountains. Tisk tisk, this little life was not bad. Compared to Dole, his life was much more enjoyable. However, he also saw that Dole had found work at the blacksmith shop, and with his conditioning at night, it was passable. Dog Aldo had thought a lot these past few days, gaining some understanding of the entire human race and even the entire Northern Kingdom through Dole. Today the rain stopped, and the morning temperature was very low. Some of the ground even had some white stuff on it. Dole came out of the slums, walked along the small ditch, and arrived at the blacksmith shop without even washing his face. At this time, the blacksmith shop had just opened, and the apprentices were starting to clean up and start the fire. Everyone greeted each other, and Dole also began to prepare. When the flames of the forging furnace rose, he felt a little warmth, gradually entering his body from the outside. His body gradually warmed up, and while pulling the bellows, he looked around. He was looking for Varrick's figure. Varrick hadn't come yet at this time today. Just then, Hag came out from inside and shouted to Dole from a distance, "Dole, Varrick is sick and won't be coming today. You'll be with Prado today." Dole was stunned. Prado, didn't he have apprentices? Prado was also a second-level blacksmith, with 2 apprentices, Eric and Yedo, who were older than Dole. If he was added, wouldn't that be 3 apprentices? Dole was a little dazed. Seeing Dole dazed, Hag shouted again, "Just go when you're told. Are you afraid you won't get food or wages? What are you spacing out for, you little brat?" Scolded, Dole quickly nodded and said, "Yes, Hag, I'll go right now." He put down the bellows, scooped some water from the nearby pool, and poured it on the newly burned red flames. As a puff of smoke rose, the flames gradually extinguished. After doing all this, Dole came to Prado's forging furnace. Prado looked at Dole and smiled, "Although you're young, you're quite strong. You'll be pulling the bellows today. I have a lot of work today and Eric and Yedo can't handle it." Dole didn't care who he was with. He had only been with Varrick for 2 days and had developed some feelings for him, and he felt a little uncomfortable that he hadn't come. After hearing this, he nodded and smiled honestly, "I'm just begging for food, I hope Prado doesn't mind me." Eric and Yedo next to him laughed at the same time, "We're all begging for food here." Prado nodded and said, "Our blacksmith shop's task today is to forge 11 steel swords, requested by the city lord's guard. We 4 second-level blacksmiths will each make 4, or rather, I'll make 3, but I'm making them for the city lord's squad leader, which requires more refinement and may be slower, so I'll have to trouble you 3 to help today. Dole, the heat must be high enough, do you understand? Regardless of the level of the blacksmith, one could at most produce 1 piece of ironware in the afternoon, and about 3 a day. Moreover, the higher the level, the more refined the forging, which actually makes it slower. Second-level blacksmiths forging second-level ironware could generally easily make 3 to 4 pieces a day, and even 5 if some processes were reduced. However, third-level ironware, regardless of the weapon, would at most not exceed 3. If one wanted to forge 4, they would have to work overtime to complete it, so when Prado said this, Dole knew that he might need to put in a lot of effort today. Sure enough, from the beginning of the forging, everyone didn't stop. Dole's hand holding the handle of the bellows hardly stopped. This work lasted for a whole day. Chapter 13. A level 2 blacksmith uses many techniques to create fine ironware. The number of hammerings is relatively high, and it is also relatively difficult to keep the ironware's shape unchanged. Prado's skills are excellent, but he's still exhausted by the end of the day. Dory had also considered becoming a blacksmith. You should know that although a beginner apprentice's monthly salary only consists of commissions, if they can create some non-graded agricultural tools, implements, etc., they will receive copper and silver coins. The monthly amount is not small, many times better than being a porter or working in the mines. Moreover, after becoming a level 1 blacksmith, one can forge weapons and armor, and the salary is even higher. However, Dory always felt that he could become a warrior, so he kept this idea in his heart. But as long as there is an opportunity in the blacksmith shop, he is still very willing to learn. Clang, clang, clang. After a whole day, Dory was also exhausted. It wasn't until after 10 p.m. that he finished forging 3 broadswords. The level 3 blacksmith and the laborers in the entire blacksmith shop were tired for a whole day. However, Hage didn't skimp on the 3 meals a day, everyone could eat meat, which made Dory very happy. After finishing the forging, Prado breathed a sigh of relief. Next was the polishing, which didn't require these laborers. Yedo and Eric were already red-faced from exhaustion at this time. In contrast, Dory didn't seem to be affected much, just a little out of breath. Prado thought Dory was very good and had the potential to become a blacksmith. He wondered if he should poach Dory from Varrick. After dinner that night, Hage called all the laborers together and started handing out money. All the laborers who participated in today's work received an extra copper coin, which made everyone very happy. When leaving, Hage kept Dory behind. Dory was a little confused, but he still stayed, ready to see what Hage had to say. Hage was not the owner of the blacksmith shop, just the manager. After everyone left, he took out another copper coin and handed it to Dory, saying with a slightly seductive tone, "Dory, do you want to become a blacksmith, a real blacksmith?" Dory was a little stunned and couldn't believe it. It had only been a few days, and Manager Hage valued him so much? Hage's somewhat dark face rarely showed a smile, and he said, "The most basic requirement for becoming a blacksmith is to have strength. Look at Yudo and Eric. Although they are older than you, their strength is not as good as yours. I wouldn't recommend them to become blacksmiths. You are different, you have the potential to become a blacksmith." Dory lowered his head and, after only a slight thought, said, "Okay, then I'll be an apprentice." Being an apprentice is different from being a laborer. Apprentices don't receive a salary. Only when they forge ironware and sell it will they receive a small commission. This is the rule of the blacksmith shop, which can prevent apprentices from being lazy and speed up their learning. If they can learn to forge ironware early, the income will be much better than being a laborer. In Doman City, there are many apprentices like Dory. After Hage confirmed, he patted Dory on the shoulder with a smile and said, "You don't have to worry. Apprentices don't have much to do most of the time. If that master needs you to be a laborer, you can still do it, and you'll get a certain amount of wages then." He could see that Dory really came for the money, otherwise he wouldn't have run to the relatively tiring blacksmith shop. In comparison, the mines, although seemingly tiring, are more comfortable and easier than the blacksmith shop. Hearing this, Dory's face turned red. Hage had clearly seen through his thoughts, so he spoke frankly. He thought for a moment and said, "Actually, I just want to buy a dictionary. Once I buy the dictionary, I won't be short of money. Then you can ask me to do whatever you want." Hage was a little surprised. He looked at Dory as if he was seeing him for the first time. "You want to learn to read?" Dory shook his head. "I just want to recognize words." Hage immediately smiled, patted him on the shoulder, and said, "You wait." He turned and walked towards the backyard. Dory was a little confused. What was Hage going to do? A moment later, Hage walked out of the backyard with a thick book in his hand, smiling, "You don't need to buy one. I have an unused one here. Take it. But it's settled, I won't give you wages anymore." Dory was stunned. He hurriedly thanked him. His goal was the dictionary. It didn't matter if he didn't get wages. What was the big deal? When he became a warrior in the future, the money would come easily. No rush. At this moment, he was moved to tears. Although the blacksmiths are usually quite taciturn, it can be seen that they are just not good at expressing their feelings. Whether it's Varric, Hage, or Prado, in Dory's eyes, they are not taciturn at all. They are cold on the outside but warm on the inside. "Thank you, Hage, thank you, Hage. I will definitely work hard and become a real blacksmith." Dory hugged the book in his arms, cherishing it very much. Hage smiled faintly and said, "It's because I saw that you are very hard-working that I invested in you. If it were Yudo and the others, I wouldn't do this. Keep up the good work. The future belongs to you young people." Dory was naturally grateful beyond words. Returning to the slums, Dory walked along the way, his steps a little brisk. During the day, the weather cleared up, and the temperature rose. There was already a slight warmth in the evening. Dory didn't walk far into the slums before he felt happy. Dog Otter darted out of the shadows and came to his side. Just as Dory was wondering, Dog Otter bit his clothes and pulled him hard. Dog Otter's strength was great. Even with Dory's current strength, he was pulled to the side. He immediately knew that Dog Otter might have discovered something, so he was warning him. Dory didn't understand, so he could only follow Dog Otter. They came to the slums and found a shadow to hide in. Soon, in the darkness, they saw several people wandering around in the slums, seemingly aimlessly, but in fact, most of their gazes were on Dory's room. "Those sons of bitches are looking for me again. Is this otter a dog? It's been so many days, and they're still watching me. As soon as the weather cleared up, they came looking for me. Damn it. Luckily, there's Dog Otter, otherwise I would have been in trouble today." He patted Dog Otter's head with some lingering fear. He suddenly remembered that the book was still at home. If these people could find him, they must have found his house. What about the book? Thinking of this, he suddenly became anxious and restless. At this moment, his hand was bitten by Dog Otter, and it hurt quite a bit. He turned his head impatiently, ready to see what was wrong with Dog Otter. After this glance, he was stunned. This dog had really become a spirit. It had actually brought the book out in a bundle. Good job, you're loyal. I didn't waste my time picking you up. In the shadows, Dory breathed a sigh of relief. As long as the book was still there, that was fine. There were plenty of broken houses in the slums. He didn't need the bed. He could just find a place to live and let Dog Otter find it. He secretly glanced at those people and directly deterred. The slums don't seem big, but in fact, once you walk in, they seem very big. With Otter watching his place, Dory didn't dare to go back. He quickly found a small, uninhabited house and hid inside. Chapter 14. Today was truly stimulating. So many things happened during the day, and then I was chased by Odo when I got back in the evening. Doral felt like one thing was coming after another recently, and the pace of life was a bit chaotic. This wasn't a good sign, and he had to become an apprentice as soon as possible and learn to make simple tools. That way, he'd have money, and he could buy a house in the commoner district. With patrol squads in the commoner district, Odo wouldn't dare be so presumptuous. Thinking of this, Doral felt that his future would definitely be bright, even better than when his parents were around. But the future is the future, and he had to do the things in front of him well. The new place didn't have a bed, only a hard bed board. Doral didn't have any candles either, so even with the dictionary, he couldn't read. Alas, how sad. In the middle of the afternoon, Doral couldn't find any place to warm up, so he could only call Dog Odo over, preparing to hug it for the night. I must say, Dog Odo was quite warm. Dog Odo felt utterly hopeless all night. Damn it, I'm a hellhound, a 7th level creature, not your pillow. Dog Odo roared in his heart. Awoo. The night passed. Although he hugged Dog Odo, his back was still against the wall, so it was a bit cold. Therefore, when he woke up, he felt stiff all over. Seeing the sky slightly bright, Doral struggled to get up and said to Dog Odo, "Forget it, let's both go to the smithy today. If you're good, nothing will happen." Dog Odo took a step back, indicating that he wasn't going, and then lay on the ground, lazily placing his head on his paws. With such a human-like expression, Doral knew that this was a protest. Could this guy really understand what I'm saying? He was a little doubtful, but this guy was indeed very intelligent. Oh well, if he doesn't want to go, he doesn't want to go. Doral prepared a little and quietly left the new house with the book. Although he knew that Odo's people were unlikely to be outside, it's always better to be safe than sorry. A new day had begun. Today, Varric also came early. He just didn't look too good, but he could still work. Seeing Doral arrive, the corners of his mouth twitched, revealing his signature honest smile. He knew that Doral's status was different now, so he didn't order Doral around. But seeing Doral still neatly tidying up and lighting the fire, he nodded in his heart. Children from the slums mature early and are also very diligent, which he liked very much. As an apprentice, Doral's tasks were different from before, and he had much more freedom. He could observe the blacksmith's methods of making ironware, and he could freely choose which master to follow. He chose Varric. Now he wasn't Varric's helper, but Varric's assistant, a disciple. Varric also had a good impression of Doral and didn't refuse. At the outermost part of the smithy's stall, on the left were various tools for life, such as kitchen knives and hoes. A young man named Lin Rui was specially watching over them, and he would go out to introduce them to customers. On the right were various weapons, mostly swords, including great swords for combat, rapiers for duelists among warrior professions, broadswords for horseback riding, as well as spears, shields, and other weapons. In Doman City, the least lacking thing might be all kinds of weapons. Of course, most of these weapons were not for domestic sale. Many merchant groups would come to collect them every year and then sell them to other places. Therefore, most of the time, blacksmiths would accumulate various weapons and then store them up to sell when the merchant groups came. The folk customs of this world were fierce, and ordinary children were required to practice basic martial arts, so ordinary people sometimes carried weapons, so the sales of weapons were much higher than the sales of ordinary tools. Doral was now an apprentice, and when the tasks weren't too tight, he could follow Varric to learn how to make some small things, such as kitchen knives, or slightly more difficult scissors, as well as hoes, sickles, and ordinary wood chopping axes. The first thing he learned was the kitchen knife. Don't think that a kitchen knife is easy to make, it's actually not easy at all. Although there was a mold, Doral completely messed it up the first time he tried. He used a small hammer, but even so, he hammered the newly made mold into 2 halves in just a few strokes. At this time, Varric began to laugh at him and then taught him many small tricks. Blacksmiths also have martial arts skills, and hammering is one of them. Dorel was very surprised when he heard this, that a blacksmith actually had to learn martial arts. But then, he saw Varric's hammer skills, which had some shadow of hammer techniques, and he believed it. No wonder no one dared to cause trouble at the smithy. These blacksmiths looked honest, but they were not easy to mess with. At noon, after resting, Varric called Dorel to the iron felt and said, "You are an apprentice that Hago specifically asked for, so I won't hide anything from you here. Our smithy has a total of 3 hammering techniques, 2 basic hammering techniques, and 1 low-level hammering technique. These are all what you will learn in the future. The basic hammering techniques are very simple. I usually use them a lot when forging weapons. You must have observed them carefully, so I won't say much here. Watch carefully, I'll demonstrate it now." He picked up a small hammer, randomly clamped a discarded sword blank, and started hammering on it. His movements were very interesting, gently jumping up, feet not leaving the ground, and then the hammer fell heavily, but the force falling on the sword blank was not very great. After doing this 3 times, he changed his movement, still gently jumping up, feet not leaving the ground, the waist sinking down, the shoulders rounding, using the lever arm to the extreme, and then bending his elbow, heavily smashing down with the hammer. The sword blank shook heavily. After doing this 3 times, he changed his movement again, but it was generally the same, only the lightness and heaviness changed. The last change was light tapping, but the movements were very fast, quickly tapping on the sword blank like pearls falling on a jade plate, clanging, but very rhythmic. After a total of 7 movements, Varric stopped and asked Dorel, "Do you understand?" Dorel was a little dazed. He scratched his head and said, "I've memorized it." Varric chuckled and said, "This is called the light and heavy basic hammering technique, with a total of 7 changes. You've also seen that there's nothing special about it, it's just for forging, not for hitting people. You try it out more. Usually, pay more attention to how I do it, and also weigh the tool blank more, feel the changes in the center, and make the thickness uniform, so that you can create good things. Try it out more, I estimate it will take you at least a month to forge an ordinary kitchen knife." Dorel suddenly felt a little discouraged. It would take a month to forge a kitchen knife, so when would he become a real blacksmith? But he also knew that blacksmithing was not so easy to become. Just the fact that Varric was almost 30 years old and only a 2nd-level blacksmith showed that. "I will work hard." He cheered himself up, and then carefully recalled Varric's movements, feeling a little hesitant in his heart. These movements didn't seem very difficult, but mastering them wouldn't be easy. After all, forging weapons required tempering, and there couldn't be any carelessness. If the force was wrong after a few hammer strikes, the tool blank would be directly scrapped. If he wanted to make a living from this, he had to work hard to figure out these things. Dorel was clear about this, so he would work honestly. It was good enough to be able to eat his fill now, so why be picky? Varric smiled when he saw Dorel's expression. At this moment, Hago walked over from the side, bringing a person with him, and said to Varric, "Varric, business is here. This customer wants to forge a sword. Do what he asks for. I'm leaving the person to you." Varric shouted loudly, "Okay." Agreeing to the matter, and then began to observe the person who had come. Chapter 15. Observing the weapon's user is the first element for a blacksmith when forging weapons for a client. Judging the characteristics of the weapon they use based on their height, arm length, and the proportions of their waist, shoulders, and hips is something a blacksmith must learn to do when creating custom-made items. Varric carefully scrutinized the person who had arrived. He was dressed in tight-fitting black clothing, which revealed his figure completely. This made it easy to observe his physique, long legs, long arms, and sharp eyes. Varric muttered to himself, wondering if this person was an assassin. With that physique, narrow and thin thrusting swords and rapiers would indeed allow him to unleash his greatest power. Long legs are conducive to agility and quick movements. Long arms allow for thrusting attacks. Keen eyes allow him to observe the weaknesses of others, ensuring a fatal blow with each strike. This person is either an assassin or a rapier fighter who has lived in the dueling arena for a long time. Varric first observed him and came to this conclusion. The person's appearance was also very ordinary, which also fit one of the 3 essential elements of an assassin. He smiled amiably and said, "Sir, what kind of sword do you need?" Please explain it in detail. The man in black nodded without any emotion, his gaze lingering on the two of them unintentionally before saying, "Which are you better at here, rapiers or thrusting swords? I would like to see both. We're slightly better at rapiers here. I have some pre-made styles here. Would you like to take a look at them first before deciding?" The man in black nodded. "All right." Varric gave Delay a look, then touched his eyes, signaling him to observe carefully. Then, he led the man in black outside to look at the styles of swords. Delay nodded lightly and then carefully observed from the side, watching what Varric was doing and observing his details. Although he had only been working for a few days, he had learned a lot about observing people's expressions. He quickly intuited that this man in black was probably not simple. His figure, arms, and legs were all very slender. He had only seen such figures among the rapier fighters kept by nobles who passed by the roadside, who were specifically used for dueling and entertainment. Such people were generally very powerful. Licking blood from their sword tips every day, they couldn't be weak. Such a person was much stronger than the guards and stewards in the mines. Delay's eyes grew envious. The style of a rapier was very simple, just a round iron rod with a sharp point at the front, very conducive to thrusting attacks. But it had no other functions. This style of sword had only one function, thrusting. The sword's body was mainly used for blocking. Its purpose was for duels between nobles, and it would not easily kill anyone. After looking at many rapiers, the man in black finally chose a style of long-handled two-handed rapier and then had it custom-made according to his height, arm length, and so on. This was not difficult for a blacksmith, it was their bread and butter. After determining the style, appearance, and main functions, the man in black left to wait, while Delay and Varric began to work. One of them stoked the fire, while the other went to the back to get materials. Soon, they started working. This time, Varric did not forge alone but explained the process of forging to Delay as he worked. Since they didn't know the other party's strength level and he looked very strong, Varric could only make a second-level rapier at most. Therefore, he had to show all his skills. Varric worked very carefully, with all the details in place. Advanced warriors had initially come into contact with battle chi and needed the blessing of battle chi, so the material of the rapier itself was very demanding. On this point, Varric communicated with Delay while introducing it in detail, especially the relationship between the various professions. Warrior apprentices are able to skillfully use a martial skill and cultivate the flexibility of their bodies. After their physical strength reaches a certain level, they are called elementary warrior apprentices. Elementary warriors mainly strengthen their bones, fascia, and internal organs. Once again strengthening the body, when they reach intermediate warrior apprentice, they strengthen their bones and internal organs. When they reach advanced warrior apprentice, they begin to come into contact with battle chi techniques, introducing battle chi seeds to strengthen their bodies. Here, what is mainly strengthened are the tendons, bones, and muscles. Their strength is powerful. The strength of an advanced warrior is about 3 times that of an ordinary person, so when forging weapons, make them as strong as possible. Otherwise, if they break when people use them, it will ruin your reputation. Delay nodded. He knew how powerful advanced warriors were. The squad leaders guarding the city gates were all intermediate warrior apprentices, and the battalion commanders were all very powerful advanced warrior apprentices. When blacksmiths forge weapons, they fold and forge them as many times as possible in order to compensate for some of the minor problems that arise during the forging process. Moreover, the flexibility and strength of weapons forged multiple times will be greatly improved. This forging technique is itself an advanced forging skill. 1 to 9 folds is a first-level blacksmith, 9 to 18 folds is a second-level blacksmith, 18 to 27 folds is a third-level blacksmith, and above 27 folds is a fourth-level or higher blacksmith. However, in their small city, there are basically no fourth-level blacksmiths, third level is the limit. The real fourth-level blacksmiths are no longer here. Delay has now learned the hammer technique and can be considered to have cultivated a martial skill. In terms of identity, he has already changed from a commoner to a trainee warrior and trainee blacksmith. Varric used the best materials and, with a clanging sound, quickly forged the appearance of a rapier. The man in black was not in a hurry. While observing the two of them forging the sword, he aimlessly looked around. Varric's skills were undoubtedly good, but he also had to teach the child how to forge at the same time, which made him curious. Therefore, he focused his attention on Delay. After observing for a while, he found that this little guy had a good figure, with long legs and arms, and it could be seen that he exercised regularly and had enough strength. He was a good seed for cultivating rapier fighting. However, he only thought that children like this who came out to work so early could not afford the cost of learning martial skills. Even if he taught him, in the future, no one would give him battle chi techniques, and he would not have much prospects. Learning martial skills is very expensive, and the food and drink are different from ordinary people. These thoughts flashed through his mind. After about 3 hours, a fresh, hot rapier was produced. After testing it, the man in black nodded in satisfaction, then paid and left. He also gave Varric some extra tips, a silver coin. This silver coin naturally fell into Varric's pocket. This was also one of their main sources of income as blacksmiths. This scene made Delay's eyes grow envious. That was a silver coin. He had never even touched a silver coin before. Seeing Delay's gaze, Varric smiled and took the silver coin out of his pocket, saying, "Come, let you touch it." Delay smiled awkwardly and did not respond, but instead went to the stove. Varric laughed and put the silver coin away, looking at Delay's back and saying, "Little guy, practice hard. When you can make some small things, you won't lack money." Delay nodded fiercely. As an apprentice, in addition to helping the blacksmith who taught him, he could also use some scraps to practice. No matter how good or bad the things he made were, they could not be considered his own but were the assets of the blacksmith shop. After all, burning fire also required coal, and there was a limit to the amount of time the iron furnace could be used each day. It could not be used indefinitely. Chapter 16. The best time to use the furnace is right after the blacksmith has finished with it, when the furnace is still hot. That way, you can use the heat to forge ordinary iron blocks into simple farming tools. Dorlai naturally needed to take advantage of the remaining heat, and soon, the blacksmith's shed was filled with the sound of clanging. Varric rested while guiding Dorlai, nodding in approval. This kid was good, the question was how much he could comprehend. The highest level blacksmith in Mondo City was only level 3, because the transition from level 2 to level 3 required a certain foundation in battle chi. With a foundation in battle chi, the blacksmith could use it to engrave various array patterns onto weapons. Being able to use battle chi to attach array patterns to weapons was the main criterion for whether a blacksmith could advance. However, the vast majority of blacksmiths in Mondo City were only level 2. A large part of the reason was that while everything else was easy to achieve, battle chi techniques were hard to find. Every blacksmith shop clearly marked the price of battle chi techniques, with even the lowest level costing at least 20 gold coins. Varric had only saved 10 gold coins after working for so many years, and with the need to support his family, accumulating 20 gold coins seemed like a distant dream. He didn't tell Dorlai any of this, fearing it would discourage him. But the good thing about this kid was that he was used to hardship. As long as he could survive, he was happy and content, a good kid. Soon, it was time for lunch. Although Dorlai worked hard at the blacksmith shop, with a high level of activity comparable to the mines, his arms and back ached after a morning's work. But the good thing was that there was enough food, and even meat to eat. Dorlai hadn't eaten meat in a long time, so he didn't feel the hardship or fatigue, and was happy all day long. Whenever he had free time, he would go to the forge and practice basic hammer techniques, which he enjoyed quite a bit, and it also strengthened his body. Soon, the day passed, and it was time to get off work again. Turn off the furnace, extinguish the fire, and put away the tools. After a day of hard work, Dorlai could take the small hammer he used back with him today. In Varric's words, to use a tool well, you had to be familiar with it. When he first started forging, he would sleep with his small hammer, treating it even better than his wife. Saying goodbye to Varric and the other blacksmiths, apprentices, and Hage, Dorlai stood at the entrance of the blacksmith shop, waving goodbye to them. Turning around, he glanced at the slightly dark city, watching the gradually setting sun, and felt a sense of loneliness for no reason. The blacksmith shop was lively, but he would be alone when he returned home at night. On the not-so-quiet avenue, his expression gradually changed from joy and happiness to indifference. This was him alone at night. Looking at the somewhat dark road, he muttered to himself, "That damn dog better not come tonight, or I'll smash him to death with the small hammer." He tightened his clothes, tucking the small hammer into his wide sleeves. Stepping onto the avenue, Dorlai's lonely figure quickly disappeared by the roadside. The slums weren't far from here. Entering the slums, a familiar end feeling arose spontaneously. Passing the ditch, Dorlai quickly saw his new home. As he walked, he quietly observed his surroundings. There were no suspicious people. Reaching the door, he quickly opened it, entered, and closed it, completing the 3 actions in one smooth motion. At this time, the dog Aldo was already waiting at the door. As soon as Dorlai entered, the dog Aldo surrounded him, turning around and around. Dorlai stroked the dog's head and played with it for a while before taking out the food from his body and placing it in front of the dog Aldo. The food in the blacksmith shop was much more plentiful than outside. He wrapped it in oiled paper, and it was still a little warm. The dog Aldo quickly unwrapped the oiled paper and quickly finished eating. After eating, he bit the oiled paper with his mouth and took it outside. Dorlai marveled. This dog Aldo was really becoming. After finishing this matter, he closed the door and took out a candle from his arms, preparing to read carefully. He wanted to take a good look at the storybook of Nalt and Yer, reading and looking up the dictionary to recognize the words inside. This was a very slow process, because there were too many words he didn't know, and sometimes he didn't even recognize the words in the dictionary, which led to him reading very slowly, very slowly. However, Dorlai still read with great interest. The room was only filled with the sound of breathing and turning pages. He also discovered a phenomenon, which was that the dog Aldo would not bother him at all when he was reading, and would quietly lie there, with a pair of eyes that seemed full of wisdom. Dorlai felt like his brain was flooded. He actually thought a dog could have wisdom, which was simply. He was quickly attracted by the story of Nalt and Yer and then immersed himself in it. This was a very great person, also very powerful, and most importantly, very smart. Starting from a small family, learning martial arts, and then learning witchcraft, he was very good at using his brain, progressing rapidly, and then walking out of the manor, entering the world, step by step. Dorlai read for a while, and the candle quickly burned out. He sighed, then put down the book and began to practice the battle stance. He found that this stance actually had a purpose. At least after practicing for a few days, he felt light all over and his movements were coordinated, so he planned to practice for a while before going to bed every day. After reading the biography of Nalt and Yer today, he was very concerned about this battle stance because Nalt and Yer had built a good foundation with this battle stance. In order to deal with Aldo, that bastard, Dorlai had to seize every opportunity to improve his abilities, In this way, he practiced the few movements back and forth, practicing until his legs were numb and his arms were tired, before resting and quickly falling into a deep sleep. The hellhound Aldo got up from the ground, saw the already sleeping Dorlai, and quickly retracted his drooping ears, propping them up straight, while putting away all the dog's states. He glanced at Dorlai, and a mouthful of light spewed out from his mouth, landing on Dorlai's body, quickly disappearing. The door opened automatically at this time, and the dog Aldo quietly slipped out. Through the surveys these past few nights, he had roughly determined that deep within the iron ore mines of Doman County, there was a small magic crystal mine that had not yet been discovered by humans or demons. As long as he went and occupied it and absorbed it, the injuries on his body would be almost healed. His injuries had been slowly improving these past few days, and he had recovered about 1/1000th of his strength, but this was still too slow. Doman County was still too remote and its resources were too exhausted. If it were in the demon realm, injuries like this would take at most 3 months to recover. Of course, the premise was that he had to survive on the spot. With the strength of the creatures of the demon realm, even if he could barely survive, he would probably be eaten by any creature he encountered, let alone be picked up and raised by someone, which was probably impossible. Thinking of this, his gratitude towards Dorlai deepened. Thanks to Dorlai, he had reluctantly given him a vegetable dumpling when he was about to die. Who would have thought that a dignified hellhound would actually survive on a human's vegetable dumpling? Sometimes, life is so ridiculous. He quickly left Doman City, running all the way along the forest next to the official road, and soon entered the mountains of the mine, and then continued to advance. As long as he found the mine, then he would not be far from recovery. The dog Aldo was very confident in this. The next morning, Dorlai woke up from his sleep. After a night of rest, he felt energetic and full of energy. He reached out and grabbed the small hammer, slamming it a few times in the air, feeling very energetic. Another pleasant day began. Wash up, go to work. Chapter 17. Soon, they arrived at the blacksmith shop, at Varick's forge. They lit the fire and prepared all sorts of tools. Only then did everyone slowly start to arrive. Dole greeted them one by one, and then relayed the message to the back, preparing for breakfast. Dole was already used to arriving early, which made others complain a bit. This little thing came too early. He was kicked several times along the way, and a few bursts of laughter were heard. However, Dole also knew that these people were just teasing him verbally, with smiles on their faces. It was just playful banter. The entire blacksmith shop was like a big family, very warm. Having been here for a few days, he also knew the real details of this blacksmith shop. The supervisor, Harley, was responsible for all management matters of Old K's blacksmith shop, including personnel allocation. There was one level 3 blacksmith, who rarely took action, sitting in the main hall. There were 3 level 2 blacksmiths, Varric, Santos, and Moray. There were 5 level 1 blacksmiths. Dole only remembered a few names, like Ike and Batty. Each blacksmith had helpers and apprentices. In total, the entire blacksmith shop had as many as 30 people. In Doman City, Old K's blacksmith shop was considered mid-sized, and the blacksmith shop had official backing. When those level 2 blacksmiths were free, they would forge and repair various military products. Varric was also like that. Dole had seen many standardized weapons because of this. After finishing breakfast, Varric sat on the iron stool, picking his teeth while watching Dole busy at work. It had been a long time since he had seen such a diligent young man. "Dole, I have nothing to do this morning. I want to test your basic hammer techniques," he said with a smile. Dole turned around, his eyes immediately lighting up, and said, "I've only been practicing for a few days, but I'm getting a feel for it. Can I demonstrate it for you?" Varric nodded and said, "Try making a hoe first." Dole nodded. The forging steps were just those few. Dole completed them meticulously. Soon, he opened the mold and took out a piece of iron plate. Holding the tongs in his left hand, he took out the fiery red iron plate, radiating scorching heat, and placed it on the iron anvil. After securing it, Dole turned around and took out the number 2 hammer from the nearby tool table, hefted it in his hand, and began to hammer the iron plate. In the beginning, he could only use the smallest number 1 hammer, which weighed only 2.5 kilograms. Now, he could use the number 2 hammer, a 5-kilogram hammer, and his strength had greatly increased. Yesterday, he had been using the number 2 hammer all the time, so he used it directly today. Recently, he didn't know what was going on, but as long as he woke up after a night's sleep, his whole body would be full of strength, feeling full of energy. He was already handling the number 2 hammer with ease. Bang! A hammer struck down, and the iron plate dented in. Dole lowered his head, looked at the depth, and began to continue forging. Basic hammer techniques did not have fixed movements. There were just those few back and forth, adapting to different scenarios. Dole had already practiced them well in the past few days, leaving only familiarity with the materials in his hands. Clang clang, the iron plate cooled and heated again. Dole quickly hammered the iron plate flat, preparing to fold it for the second forging. Ordinary farm tools generally only required 2 or 3 forgings, depending on the material itself. This was scrap material, so 3 forgings were enough. Varric watched from the side without giving any guidance. Seeing Dole preparing for the second forging, he smiled and said, not bad, you've mastered the basics so quickly. Ordinary farm tools don't require much attention. Just hammer the material evenly and shape it. Whether it's 2 forgings or 3 forgings, it depends on yourself. If it's scrap material, it's best to have 3 or more forgings." He raised his head, took Dole's fire tongs, took out the iron plate to look at it, pointed to a few places, and then put it down, saying, "These places have flaws, uneven thickness. Use small force and multi-layered hammering, starting from the surroundings." Dole nodded, not saying anything. He had learned a lot in the past 2 days and knew what he meant. Starting from the second forging, the hardness of the material began to increase. This was the time to test strength. Dole had 2 years of experience in the mine, so he had strength. In addition, he had been doing warrior training, so he didn't lack strength. Varric watched Dole forge while giving guidance. Soon, a hoe blank was freshly produced. After quenching, the hoe was formed. Although there were some small flaws, it was enough for Dole. This hoe was also the first farm tool Dole had ever completed. He carefully recalled the process just now and had a clearer understanding of forging. As he was preparing to make the second one, Supervisor Harley walked in from outside, striding vigorously. Behind him were 5 armored soldiers in military attire, each holding many iron tools in their hands. Supervisor Harley said a few words to those soldiers, and they each took the things in their hands and walked towards several level 2 blacksmiths, including Varric. Varric seemed to be used to it. When he saw that person walking forward, he respectfully greeted him, took the weapons in their hands, and bowed his head, saying, "Varric is at your service." The soldier nodded and said politely, "As soon as possible." Varric nodded. He lowered his head and saw that the weapons in his hands were all swords, 2 broadswords, 2 war swords, and 1 rapier. These swords had many nicks, scratches, and even signs of breakage, obviously no longer usable. He carefully examined them, turned around, and said to Dole, "Go to the back and request some refined steel, about 10 kilograms." Dole nodded and went to the back to prepare the materials. Repairing weapons and reforging a weapon were different. Dole already had some experience, and when Varric said it, he understood what was going on. In addition to Varric, Santos and Moray also received tasks at this time. For a time, the entire blacksmith shop was clanging and banging. Dole was Varric's apprentice, and he was only responsible for this side, following Varric, helping and learning at the same time. His expression was meticulous and very serious, because he knew that this was his livelihood, at least for the time being. As long as he became a level 1 blacksmith, he would be able to survive independently and not have to look at other people's faces. This was the foundation of survival. No matter what he could do in the future, at least now his task was to concentrate on learning. Varric was holding the number 3 iron hammer, weighing a full 10 kilograms, a whole size larger than the one in Dole's hand. When the hammer struck down, sparks flew everywhere, but in Varric's hand, the 20-pound iron hammer was as light as a feather. Clang clang, whoosh whoosh. A morning passed quickly. Varric only repaired 1 rapier. After eating, he continued to repair. Dole learned from the side. Occasionally, when Varric needed him, he would have him use a small hammer to assist in forging, sometimes hammering heavily, sometimes hammering lightly, and sometimes having him tap lightly like raindrops. These changes allowed Dole to learn a lot. Just one day, he felt that he had grown a lot. Recently, he didn't know what was going on, but he felt that his ears and eyes were sharp, and his strength had no limit, as if as long as he could eat his fill, he would have inexhaustible strength. Forging weapons was also a process of understanding weapons. The 5 war swords took a full 2 days to repair. Holding the last repaired broadsword in his hand, Dole thought of basic swordsmanship, held it in his hand, and swung it in the blacksmith shop. The broadsword was very heavy, and Dole couldn't hold it steady. He was just playing around, and holding it in his hand was like being drunk, causing Varric to laugh heartily. Chapter 18. Varric looked at Dole, wiping the sweat from his forehead. Repairing these swords wasn't easy. Sitting on the nearby stool, he felt a little gratified. Dole was a good seed, willing to endure hardship and able to learn. If he pursued this line of work in the future, he would definitely be more successful than himself. At noon, Supervisor Harley walked out from inside with heavy steps. He first went to the other 2 blacksmith shops and finally came to Varric's, gathering the swords together and directing a few other apprentices to place them at the entrance. After finishing all this, Harley breathed a sigh of relief, adopting the air of a chief steward. He stood next to Varric, looked at Dole, and smiled slightly. "Are you interested in becoming a contracted blacksmith here?" Dole scratched his head. "I haven't become a level 1 blacksmith yet, I'm just an apprentice." "Isn't it a bit early, Master Harley?" Harley still smiled. "As long as you are willing to endure hardship and put in the effort, becoming a level 1 blacksmith is only a matter of time. I saw the hoe you made, it's very good." Varric stood up from the stool, gave Dole a thumbs up, and said, "Dole is the most talented kid I've ever seen. It's only been a few days, and he can already make farm tools. He'll definitely be good in the future." Dole stood aside shyly. Harley nodded and said, "The advancement of blacksmiths is the same as that of warriors. The process of forging iron is also the process of tempering oneself. Train hard and strive to cross the threshold of a primary warrior as soon as possible, that way blacksmithing will be easier." Harley could see that Dole had practiced martial arts techniques, so he said casually. Dole responded with a smile while feeling a chill in his heart. He had only casually showed off his war sword skills, but they had actually seen it. Martial arts training is not that easy either. At least he is just starting now. Relying on the advantages of blacksmithing, he can exercise his whole body's muscles and move towards becoming a primary warrior step by step, but the distance is still very far. Varric patted him on the shoulder and said, the hammer techniques, both large and small, are also a kind of martial art, exercising muscles and bones. The fire of the furnace can also train your skin very well. Train hard. Dal nodded, he could naturally feel it. Varric had the strength of a high-level warrior apprentice. Dal had long heard him say that he only needed a book on battle aura to find a way to continue improving. However, battle aura books were too expensive, even the lowest level introductory battle aura book cost 20 gold coins. That was 20 gold coins. Harley encouraged Dal a few words, then stood outside. Soon, a military carriage came over, followed by a team of soldiers. Several of the soldiers came over, negotiated with Supervisor Harley, took away those weapons, paid the gold coins, and quickly disappeared at the end of the road. Seeing this, Dal felt even more motivated. It would be great if he had the ability to forge war swords someday. Then he could start wizard training. The records on Neri about wizards all required a large number of medicinal herbs and auxiliary materials. With his current financial ability, he couldn't afford any of those things. He could only do basic physical training first. With nothing to do in the afternoon, Dal started practicing with scrap again, making some small tools, which were already taking shape, but still not skilled enough, so they sold for a lower price. There were still people who bought these lower-priced items. After all, there were plenty of poor people outside the city who couldn't afford the high-quality ones, so they could only buy these items of average quality. Therefore, Dal wasn't afraid that no one would buy his things. Time quickly passed by 20 days. During these days, Dal forged a lot of farm tools, and the quality became better and better. He also had some copper coin income, and his life had a basic guarantee. With each passing day of forging, Dal's skin, which was already dark, was now even darker, but underneath the skin, his muscles bulged, already possessing a certain scale, although it was only a few days. It was time to get off work. Dal greeted Varric and a few other familiar blacksmiths, picked up the clothes he had placed aside, and walked towards the slums. He was in a relatively cheerful mood because he had been paid today, 20 copper coins. He wanted to hurry home to read. Although he already had a dictionary, the characters inside were a big problem. He could only learn dozens of new characters a day, and it would probably take a while to read normally. Whenever he thought of the things recorded in Neri's Legend of the Magic Warrior, Dal felt a little excited. Whether becoming a warrior or a wizard, as long as you reached a certain level, you would have great prospects in the future. Ordinary level 1 warriors could easily find a job, and their monthly salary was settled in silver coins. As long as he could become a warrior, there was nothing more to say. As for wizards, there were only a few in the entire Demon City, they were legendary figures. Although wizards had no combat power at the beginning, they relied on their wisdom, various alchemy and medicines, and were even more powerful than warriors. Whenever he thought of the future, Dal, walking on the road, almost wanted to shout out loud, he was very excited. Soon, he arrived at the entrance of the slums. He looked up and saw a few people standing there, as if they were looking at him. After seeing who it was, his face suddenly stiffened, and the heat in his heart was instantly doused with a layer of ice water, icy cold to the bone. Damn it, it's Odo. He hadn't seen this guy for many days, why did he run into him again? Odo also saw Dal at this time. As soon as he saw him, he remembered his miserable state that day, and his face immediately twisted. Grab him for me, you damned commoner, dare to resist, I'm going to break his legs. The people on both sides were a little puzzled when they heard this, but soon someone remembered, wasn't this the kid who often robbed people at the Bianchi mine? See where else you can run, dare to hit our big brother Odo. Someone immediately pounced on him. The others also remembered who Dal was and picked up their weapons, rushing towards Dal. Dal was shocked at this moment, damn Odo, isn't this over yet? While panicking, he put on the clothes in his hand and turned around to run. He didn't go to the place where he had been staying these days, but turned and ran to other parts of the slums. The roads inside the slums were intricate and complicated, and there were garbage dumps everywhere, which were very suitable for running away. The most new small say is in 6-9 book bar first hair. Seeing this, Odo observed Dal's clothes and was immediately exasperated, chase him for me, he must have made money, otherwise he wouldn't be able to afford such good clothes. When the others heard this, they immediately became motivated. Robbing a commoner was completely without any psychological burden for them. Even the police station and the magistrate were unwilling to come here. The number of commoners who died every day was more than the number of murders in the city in a year. No one cared about killing a commoner. Moreover, the other party had money, which was what they valued. Moreover, doing this kind of thing was not once or twice, they had long been accustomed to it. After such a long period of training, Dahl's strength and agility were no longer what they used to be. With his full strength, he quickly dashed into the slums and into a small alley. The alley was full of water and mud. Walking all the way, his feet were covered in mud. While complaining and running, Dahl didn't stop at all. After walking out of the alley, he ran to another alley. He knew that his feet were covered in mud and water, so he definitely couldn't escape the other party's tracking. He could only try his best to run forward, preparing to find a dry road. However, no matter how fast he was, Odo was still chasing closely behind. Odo's physical fitness was not bad either. With the coach hired by his father and his usual training, he was actually a little stronger than Dahl. Dahl looked back and saw Odo chasing closely, so he could only run desperately. He quickly ran out of the alley and entered a main road in the slums. He looked up and saw that there were people everywhere, so he deliberately ran to places with more people. Chapter 19. Odo chased after him, and at the alley entrance, he only glanced once to see Dore darting swiftly through the crowd. Hunched over, he was barely visible amidst the throng, on the verge of disappearing from sight. Immediately, Odo waved his hand in exasperation, shouting, "Chase after him! Beat that little bastard to death!" This wasn't the first time Dore had escaped from his grasp, and Odo wished he could kill him instantly. Only 3 of them gave chase, rushing into the crowd, causing chaos and scattering people along the way. Dore was short and nimble, darting back and forth through the crowd. At first, Odo could see his entire body, but eventually, he could only catch glimpses of his shadow. He grew anxious, worried that the kid would escape again. He racked his brains, thinking hard. Soon, he recalled the road ahead and came up with a plan, saying, "You two, go over there. He has to turn that way." Although the slums had a complex layout, they had been wreaking havoc here for years and knew it like the back of their hands. The two nodded and ran off in different directions. Odo didn't stop, pursuing relentlessly. The surrounding people saw him coming and quickly changed their expressions, hurrying to get out of his way. Dore darted back and forth through the crowd several times, soon losing sight of the people behind him. After passing the main road, he quickly slipped into a narrow alley, stopping to catch his breath. He peeked cautiously out of the alley entrance, and after seeing no one coming, he finally relaxed. That Odo is a real dog. It's been so long, and he still won't let me go. When I get the chance, I'll give him a good one, so he remembers it. Dore took a few breaths and then hunched over, running forward. As he was about to reach the alley entrance, he heard a faint rustling of footsteps ahead, and his expression instantly changed. They're catching up? He subconsciously touched the small hammer at his waist, and then his expression turned fierce. Reaching the alley entrance, he peeked cautiously ahead and saw Odo's 2 men running from a distance, checking the small alleys on both sides of the road as they ran. Dore withdrew his gaze, relieved. Only 2 people, and no Odo. Good, good. These guys are just Odo's subordinates, mostly kids from poor families like myself. Besides, I've become stronger now, so I don't necessarily have to be afraid of them. Thinking this, he took out his hammer, took a deep breath, leaned against the wall, and slowly crouched down, sitting on the ground, quietly waiting for them to come. This alley's clear. Clear. This side's clear too. The 2 searched all the way, already starting to become careless. The kid had been running for so long, who knew where he'd gone? They were just following Odo's orders now. If it weren't for Odo these past few years, they wouldn't have had such good days. They were just out here trying to make a living, their parents had long stopped caring about them. Soon, they reached the alley next to Dore. Dore had now calmed down, taking deep breaths, listening quietly for footsteps. The 2 slowly approached, their footsteps gradually becoming clearer. They reached the entrance of Dore's alley. Dore, hunched over, suddenly sprang out from below, slamming his hammer directly into one of the men's knees. Having hammered iron ingots for so long, he had become skilled at wielding the hammer, knowing the power and angle. He even held back a little force for accuracy. The 2 men didn't react at all. They only saw a black shadow dart out of the alley. Crack! One man immediately clutched his knee and fell to the ground, while the other was still stunned. But while he was stunned, Duray wasn't. After crippling one, he directly swung the hammer, slamming it into the other man's chest from below. Only then did the man see Duray's figure. Their eyes met. The man was somewhat flustered, while Duray was expressionless, even a little cold. The man hurriedly put his hands in front of his chest. Duray's hammer struck, making a dull thud. The man's face contorted in pain, and he fell backward. Duray didn't expect it to be so easy. Pressing his advantage, he moved his feet and continued to swing the hammer at the man's body, not caring where he hit, just smashing. Thud, thud, thud. After 3 consecutive blows, the man lay still, not moving, several ribs broken in his chest. Duray stood up from the ground, panting slightly, and looked at the man he had first knocked down. The man, at this moment, couldn't care less about the pain. He looked at Duray with shock and fear. "Don't kill me. I don't know anything." Duray glanced at the man's leg. His knee had been shattered, and the bone was exposed, looking incredibly miserable. But Duray didn't feel any sympathy for him. These two had harmed countless people, even killing them wouldn't be too much. His leg was broken, he was finished. Duray didn't linger, running off into the distance. The man immediately breathed a sigh of relief, then, thinking of something, his face turned despairing, and he even forgot the pain. Otto found the alley entrance and saw the two men, his expression instantly changing. "Who hurt you?" He quickly knelt down, looking at the man lying on the ground. The man forced himself to endure the pain, his expression somewhat despairing. "It was Duray. He ambushed us. He's very strong, boss." "My leg." Otto checked the other man, who wasn't dead, just unconscious, with several ribs broken in his chest and blood soaking his clothes. One of his hands was also smashed, with several metacarpal bones broken. He looked closely at the wounds, they were clearly caused by a hammer. "That kid, he's that strong now?" Looking at the injuries of the two men, Otto's face darkened. These two were just small-time thugs, but their strength wasn't bad. They had followed him for years, but now... The man naturally saw Otto's expression, many words on the tip of his tongue, but he swallowed them hard. "It's over." Otto thought for a moment and said, "Don't worry, you'll be okay. I'll go get the other brothers to help get you out of here. That little bastard, he's really pissed me off." He turned and left. Seeing Otto's expression, the man's heart sank, then sank lower and lower, reaching the bottom, his heart ice cold. Otto naturally went to get people, but he didn't come back himself, leaving a few dozen copper coins behind and never caring about them again. There were too many hotheads like this in the slums. As long as you gave them enough to eat, some people would be willing to risk their lives for you. Having lost 2 of his men, Otto was naturally unwilling to give up. While walking out, he was inexplicably drawn to the city gate. Reaching the city gate, he looked up and his eyes lit up. He searched among the city guards guarding the gate and immediately saw Feller, the squad leader, sitting behind the other city guards. Once, by chance, he had drunk with Feller and his father. That night, his father had even taken Feller to a bar, so they could be considered acquaintances. He immediately walked over. The city guard stopped him. Otto pointed to Feller behind him and said cautiously, "I'm looking for Lord Feller. We know each other." The city guard glanced at Otto, inwardly sneering. Others might not know him, but he did. This was just a small-time thug. But knowing the squad leader was another matter entirely. He turned his head and said, "Squad leader Feller, someone's looking for you." Feller raised his head, glanced over, and frowned when he saw Otto. He knew Feller's father, Sam, a manager at the Bianchi mine. He could collect a lot of money from him every month. His son wasn't seen very often. He nodded and said, "Tell him to come over." "That's Sam's son." The surrounding city guards, hearing Karen, immediately understood. The city guard who had stopped Feller patted Otto on the shoulder. "So you're Sam's son? Go ahead." Feller took a breath and thanked the city guard before standing in front of Feller, saying somewhat shyly, "Sir, may I speak with you in private?" Duray didn't know that his actions had caused some trouble. After hiding for a long time, not noticing anyone following him, he bought some food and returned to his old nest. When he had run away earlier, he had dropped all the food. Now that he had money, he bought something good for the dog Otto. Chapter 20. It was already dark, and Delay had forgotten to bring candles again, so he could only practice the stance work of basic boxing for a while, then practice basic boxing and basic hammer techniques, and then go to sleep. After Delay fell asleep, Aoduo quickly got up from the ground. He slowly came to Delay's face, and a five-colored light flew towards Delay's forehead, quickly disappearing. Delay slept even more soundly. The dog Aoduo lazily stretched, then darted out the door, quickly disappearing into the slums. Its speed became faster and faster, and its movements became more and more secretive. If you didn't look carefully, you wouldn't even see its shadow. The dog Aoduo quickly arrived at the depths of the mine, sitting on a mountain peak, its immense power permeating into the mountain, extracting the magic power from it. As his power increased, he didn't care much about the surrounding creatures. There was almost no danger in this place. On the contrary, the place where he often stayed was devoid of birds and beasts. No creatures dared to approach. The mountain was quiet, without even the sound of insects, only the sound of wind blowing through the peaks and leaves rustling. Waking up in the morning, Delay opened his eyes, feeling his mind sharp and his whole body full of power. He touched his skin, which was rough and tough, and the muscles under his skin bulged, that was power. The physical training was basically completed, and he was very close to becoming an intermediate warrior apprentice. He was only 12 years old now, so there was no rush, but he felt a sense of urgency in his heart, which came from the surrounding environment and from Aoduo. Carefully leaving the house and arriving at the blacksmith shop, Delay breathed a sigh of relief. As long as he was at the blacksmith shop, everything would be fine. No matter how presumptuous Aoduo was, he wouldn't dare to be presumptuous in the blacksmith shop. After all, he was just a small character. The blacksmith shop had complicated relationships, and anyone pulled out could control him completely. As usual, he tidied up the tools, lit the furnace, and after finishing all this, breakfast was just ready, and Wieryuk also arrived. After eating, they started working early. There was nothing much going on in the blacksmith shop these days. Wieryuk was idle from morning to night, so Delay had more time to forge various farm tools, hoes, sickles, kitchen knives, small hammers, honing his skills, already becoming proficient. He wielded the number 2 hammer with great skill, but he was still not strong enough to lift the number 3 hammer. The number 3 hammer was the symbol of a level 1 blacksmith. Delay's progress was rapid, and it had long attracted everyone's attention. Even the other apprentices and level 1 blacksmiths expressed great surprise. After eating, Wieryuk patted his belly and sat on his seat to rest. He watched Delay busying around and chuckled, "You can forge more yourself now, up to 8 folds at most. Have you ever thought about 9 folds?" Delay stoked the fire and chuckled, "Of course I have. With 9 folds, I can forge a sword." Being able to forge weapons meant having the strength of a level 1 blacksmith. As long as he passed the blacksmith certificate, he could officially start working. He had been thinking about it for a long time. Wieryuk leaned forward slightly, with a slightly seductive tone, "Want to try? Use my share of the raw ore." Before having the strength of a level 1 blacksmith, he could only use scrap, but scrap was very limited, with high hardness and low toughness. It was okay for making farm tools and other tools, but scrap was not suitable for forging weapons. Wieryuk had a daily quota for practice, and if he didn't practice, he could give it to Delay. Hearing this, Delay became eager to try. Recently, his strength had greatly increased, and he could lift the number 3 hammer, so he gritted his teeth and said, "Try." Wieryuk chuckled and said, "Then go get it. Let's make a rapier, that will be easier." It was still early in the morning after just finishing breakfast, and there was nothing else to do. Wieryuk was also trying to find some fun for himself. Delay, with his strong learning ability, would eventually become a level 1 blacksmith, so might as well give it a try. Hearing that Delay was going to make a sword, the blacksmiths and apprentices who had nothing to do all gathered around. Sangdes leaned on Wieryuk's side and jeered, "Wieryuk, are you trying to be lazy? Delay is only 12 years old, and he's only been here for 2 months, right?" Mole nodded beside him, and said in a muffled voice, "Yeah, it took me more than half a year to master the tricks of level 1. Sangdes said, "This guy definitely wants to see Delay make a fool of himself." There was an echo of agreement from all around. Wieryuk chuckled and said, "Anyway, there's nothing to do this morning, so let's try it. Delay can already do 8 folds, and he's using scrap. If he uses raw ore, 9 folds should be possible if he's careful." Mole's eyes widened immediately, "What? 8 folds? How is that possible? Several level 1 blacksmiths were also shocked at this time. They calculated that Delay had only been here for more than a month, even if he had worked in the mine before and had some strength, but this speed was a bit amazing, right? Weir-Yuk smiled mysteriously and said, "This guy has good talent, you guys have underestimated him." At this time, Delay had already taken out the raw ore from the back with a bucket. The iron ore had been ground into iron sand, and the purplish-red iron sand looked like rapeseed particles, grain by grain. Delay didn't expect so many people to be gathered outside. He didn't think much about it. He weighed the ore he needed and poured it into the crucible little by little, then quickly ran to the bellows, ready to heat it. At this time, the handyman Gonmo quickly walked over from the side, snatched Delay's bellows, and said with a smile, "Let me do it, let me do it." Seeing him like this, Delay realized that these people had come to watch the fun. "Everyone is very free today." Delay nodded and said, "Then thank you, Gonmo." Gonmo was a little older than him, but he hadn't come much earlier, and his body was still a little thin, not as strong as Delay. Delay took off his clothes, revealing a slightly muscular body, reached out and weighed the number 2 hammer, feeling it was a bit light, then picked up the number 3 hammer and held it in his hand, feeling it was heavy. He will use it today. He weighed it and put it down, quickly going to get the mold. He was already familiar with these things, and he quickly and carefully made the mold for the sword and placed it aside. The surrounding blacksmiths didn't say much. They were usually relatively dull, didn't like to talk, and rarely chatted during breaks. In the slums, they were said to be so quiet you couldn't pry a fart out of them with 3 sticks. Gonmo pulled the bellows like he was flying, and soon, the fire turned the crucible red, and the iron sand inside began to slowly melt, turning into a pile of red-hot liquid, even reflecting Delay's face in red. When the color inside turned reddish-white, Delay picked up the tongs, lifted the entire crucible, quickly ran to the mold, and poured the liquid into it. A burst of pungent smoke dissipated, and all the liquid in the crucible flowed into the mold. Delay tidied up the crucible and put it aside. After waiting for a while, he knocked open the mold, revealing the dark sword body inside that had cooled down slightly. This was just the newly formed mold. The sword body needed to be repeatedly folded and forged, 9 times, to become a level 1 sword. This was just the beginning. Delay held the pliers in one hand, placed the sword mold on the felt, picked up the number 3 hammer in the other hand, straightened his posture, using the basic hammer technique, and hammered it down. With one hammer, a small pit appeared on the concave part of the mold. Delay looked at the depth and knew how much force he should use, and then slowly began to hammer it. Time passed slowly. 1 fold, 2 folds, 3 folds, even 4 folds were not difficult, and soon reached 5 folds. Starting from the 5th fold, the hardness of the material had already appeared, and it began to slowly become tough. At this time, it was the test of the blacksmith's endurance. Delay hammered down, sweat and hammer flying together, his strength not decreasing at all, and even his speed had not changed. Chapter 21. Hammer blow after hammer blow landed, causing Varric beside him to nod in approval. Santos and Morlai also nodded. At this point, if Dolai didn't make a mistake, the sword would be finished. This little guy's basic hammer techniques were also quite good, even though he'd only been practicing for a month. Too fast. By the 8th tempering, Dolai's forehead was covered in sweat, but his gaze remained firm and his expression steady. Varric and the other 2 second-level blacksmiths breathed a sigh of relief. This little guy was definitely a first-level blacksmith. All he needed to do was take the blacksmith certification exam, and he could start working with a license. When Dolai pulled out the iron sword and plunged it into the ice water for quenching, applause erupted from all around. "Congratulations, congratulations! Dolai, you're the most talented kid I've ever seen. Dolai, you've surpassed my half-year progress in just a month and a half. That's enough. I'm treating you to a drink when I get paid next month." This was the voice of a first-level blacksmith. That's right, let's have a drink." Everyone burst into laughter. Everyone knew that Dolai came from the slums and originally didn't have much money. It was just a joke. Dolai wiped the sweat from his forehead, his face covered in black grime. He didn't care at all and said with high spirits, no problem, as long as I get paid." Haha. Just then, a voice came from the side, yes, let's sign a contract next." Boss Harley's voice came from outside. Hearing Boss Harley's voice, the blacksmiths also laughed. "Boss Harley, you've found a treasure. Dolai advanced to first level blacksmith in just a month. He has the potential to reach third level in the future. Morlai's unique voice immediately resonated with everyone around. That's right, Boss Harley has to treat us. Santos also joked. Harley's usually stern face now showed some expression, and he looked at Dolai with a hint of gentleness, saying, treating is a must, but not now. Okay, it's time for lunch. There's still work in the afternoon. We've been waiting for boss to say that. Everyone, let's eat. Dolai scratched his head, looked at Supervisor Harley, and became a little bewildered. Harley beckoned to him. Seeing that Dolai wasn't preparing to move, Varric kicked him and said, hurry up and go. Only then did Dolai wake up as if from a dream and walk towards Harley. The contract signing process was uneventful. From then on, Dolai was a member of Old K's blacksmith shop, with a base salary of 7 silver coins per month until he advanced to second-level blacksmith. Dolai could take a 10% cut of all production in between. Although it was low, it was the market price. Going from 0 income to 10 Mafa silver coins at once, Dolai was stunned at the time. 7 silver coins, that's 700 Mafa copper coins. If this were a few months ago, it would definitely be a huge sum, no, an astronomical figure. As a result, Dolai's steps were unsteady when he came out. It was too surreal. He felt that blacksmithing wasn't difficult. As long as he was a little more serious, he could do well. He just didn't expect that he would escape poverty in such a short time. It was too surprising. Harley put away the contract and walked out from behind Dolai. Seeing that Dolai was absent-minded, Harley was also a little emotional. Over the years, he had seen many people, but Dolai was more real than others. This teenager from the slums was truly amazingly talented. He patted Dolai on the shoulder and said, don't be dazed. First level blacksmith is just the starting point. When you reach the level of third level or above, you can be considered truly entering this industry. Don't look at so many people in the blacksmith shop. In the entire blacksmithing industry, they are only considered beginners. Dolai was no longer the newbie he used to be. Hearing this, his heart suddenly felt heavy. Yes, after becoming a first-level blacksmith, the next step is to become a second-level blacksmith. After becoming a second-level blacksmith, he still has to save money to buy the battle chi manual. 20 gold coins are not so easy to save. Only by practicing battle chi can he have the opportunity to enter the third-level blacksmith. Only third-level blacksmiths are respected, just like the treasure of Old K's blacksmith shop who never shows his face. He doesn't do anything all year and still has dozens of gold coins and dividends. This is the weight of a third-level blacksmith. If he could reach the third-level blacksmith, then the resources for the wizard might be enough, and he might be able to try. Thinking of this, his unsteady steps stabilized again, and he nodded to Supervisor Harley. He said seriously, I will study hard. Supervisor Harley patted him on the shoulder and said, yes, that's how it should be. Study hard, at least be worthy of the salary I pay you every month. After speaking, he laughed and left. Walking out from behind, he came to the dining hall, and all the blacksmiths stood up and paid their respects to him. Dolai was moved in his heart. According to the etiquette recorded in the legend of Neri, he bowed to everyone. These people all have families, but they are all simple-minded and have no crooked thoughts. He sincerely wants to stay here forever. Looking at Dolai's awkward etiquette, Harley wanted to laugh, but he didn't laugh after all. After all, he came from the slums and didn't know anything. Because Dolai had just entered the first-level blacksmith and his foundation was unstable, he was not directly assigned a forging furnace in the afternoon, but continued to follow Varric to continue learning. Of course, if there was anything, Supervisor Harley said that he could use the forging furnace next to him that no one was using. Even so, Dolai felt full of energy, and his life was finally on the right track. Soon after finishing the meal, everyone came out from behind with laughter. Dolai and Varric saw a figure in black in front of their forging furnace. Dolai took a look and keenly felt that this man in black was the swordsman from last time. Varric also noticed him, so he stepped forward and asked. The man in black looked at Dolai, looking at his changes, somewhat strangely. This little guy has good talent. How long has it been? He has developed this body of muscles. He just looked at it and didn't speak, took out his battle sword and handed it to Varric. Varric took it in his hand with some doubt, and saw the battle sword. At this time, the battle sword was scarred, all kinds of gaps, and subtle cracks. He was a little surprised. This guy's opponent is somewhat powerful. The man in black didn't say much, took out a small black package from behind, and slowly opened it. Varric and Dola's eyes were involuntarily attracted by his small package. At this time, the small package was opened, revealing the contents inside. The two blinked their eyes. Black essence copper, a material with very high hardness and toughness, belongs to the third-level material, and is very valuable. Varric explained to Dolai, and then looked at the man in black and said, "Does your excellency want to integrate black essence copper into it?" The man in black nodded and said, "Yes, can it be done?" Varric nodded and said, "Yes, please wait a moment." At this time, Dolai knew what he should do, stoking the fire and preparing various tools. Dolai is already a first-level blacksmith, so the forging process after the material is integrated is completed by the two people working together, one hammer at a time, with tacit cooperation. The man in black watched from the side, somewhat shocked. How long has this kid been here, and he can actually cooperate with a second-level blacksmith? This body of strength, there is something to it. Generally speaking, without a warrior's inheritance, it is difficult to improve one's ability in a very short time. This requires medicine, a large amount of meat, and the cooperation of training methods. Could it be that this little guy has some talent? If he has the talent to become a warrior, wouldn't it be a waste to stay here? How much money does a blacksmith earn in a year? Chapter 22. Thinking of this, while watching them forge iron, he said softly, "I am a swordsman, serving Lord Odom, the deputy city lord. My name is Cardia, and your skills are quite good." Hearing the name Cardia, Dolai didn't react much, but Varric was a little surprised. He immediately raised his head, looked at the man in black, and said, "Are you the star swordsman Cardia?" Cardia nodded humbly, his attitude not arrogant, but very peaceful, saying, "Yes, star swordsman is the title my friends gave me. This little guy Dolai is good, he's already touched the threshold of a level 1 blacksmith so quickly." Although Varric was surprised, he wasn't astonished. The two were not on the same level, he had just heard people mention him often. He glanced at Dolai and smiled. Dolai has good talent and is very perceptive. He's already a level 1 blacksmith now. After some time to accumulate experience, once he has the strength of an intermediate warrior, he can find a way to become a level 2 blacksmith. He could tell that this Cardia had a good impression of Dolai, so he mentioned it. Dolai didn't know what they were talking about. This Cardia seemed very powerful, but what did it have to do with him? Varric came back to his senses, and the two continued to forge iron. After an afternoon, the fighting sword was reforged. It was exactly the same size and shape as before, and even the center of gravity hadn't changed, but the weight had increased a bit. After quenching and polishing, Cardia took the sword from Dolai's hands and swung it a few times gently, very satisfied. He looked at Dolai and smiled, "Little guy, you're very good. If you have time, you can come and find me." As he spoke, he flipped his wrist, popped out a business card, and handed it to Dolai. Dolai was a little confused, but it was never good to refuse others, so he wiped his dirty hands on his clothes and carefully took the business card. Seeing his actions, Cardia became even more satisfied. He put away the sword, paid the money, and turned to leave. Because it was just a modification and he brought his own materials, it took an afternoon. After giving the money to the back, the two had 3 silver coins left. Varric waved his hand generously and gave Dolai a silver coin. Looking at the silver coin in his hand, Dolai was filled with emotion and almost burst into tears. He had finally seen a silver coin. After getting off work, he walked around outside and bought a set of clothes and a bundle of candles on the way. A bundle of candles was 12, 1 copper coin each, very cheap. A set of ordinary linen clothes was about 30 copper coins. Dolai would be lying if he said he didn't feel the pinch of spending 40 or so Mafa copper coins in one go. Along the way, Dolai was afraid of running into that damned Odom, but he was lucky today and didn't encounter him. Back in the thatched hut, Dolai was invigorated. With his efforts over this period, he had learned most of the words. Tonight, with the candles, he would work hard to learn all the words he didn't understand, and then he could start learning the wizardry section. According to what was said in Neri's book, wizards could greatly enhance their mental strength, which could enhance perception, making everything very convenient, even though wizard apprentices had almost no combat power. But that was still a wizard, a mysterious wizard. Compared to warriors, wizards were very rare in ordinary life, almost never seen, but the power of wizards was obvious to all, almost running through the entire history of the human race. The most powerful humans in history were wizards, who could destroy cities with a wave of their hands, which was very terrifying, like gods. If being a warrior was the pursuit of every normal person, then being a wizard was everyone's aspiration. Opening the door, the dog Odom was lying on the ground, not moving at all. Delay went over, touched his dog's head, and put down his food. Today, the kitchen had leftover fatty meat, which was very rich. The dog Odom looked at the rich food and thought, I don't eat this stuff anymore, but he didn't refuse and ate everything clean, honestly fulfilling his duty as a dog. But he quickly saw that Delay had also brought a bundle of candles today, and even changed his clothes. He blinked his eyes. Did this guy make a fortune? Thinking about Delay's current strength, he must have earned money from blacksmithing. It was late, and the flickering candlelight in the dark little room became the only light. Delay fixed the candle and then opened Neri's book. He wasn't going to train today, reading the book was more important. While reading the book and flipping through the dictionary, Delay studied very carefully. Soon, he had looked up all the words he didn't understand. Actually, there weren't many left to begin with. Neri's wizardry section was very simple, with only one technique described. In fact, whether it was warriors or wizards, this book only introduced the basics, up to level 1 of each profession. There was nothing higher. And whether it was warriors or wizards, the most basic thing was only one technique. The warriors section introduced in more detail how to train tendons, bones, skin, and internal organs, while the wizardry section only had one technique. The name of this technique was also very simple, called basic meditation. After studying it for 2 hours, Delay finally finished reading all the content of this meditation technique, and mentally felt that it didn't seem too difficult. This basic meditation technique was very simple. When in a calm state of mind, imagine an object in your mind. This object could be a physical object or an animal. The more detailed the imagination, the better. There was no fixed routine. If meditation advanced, it would be felt naturally, without anything special. The meaning was that when the skill was sufficient, it would naturally advance. It seemed a bit of a rip-off, leaving Delay with no clue, but this was Neri's wizardry enlightenment technique. After reading it, Delay looked around, looking for something he was most familiar with to start practicing this meditation technique. He thought about it for a long time, but it seemed like he had nothing he could think of. After thinking for a long time, he inadvertently turned around and heard the metallic sound of the copper coins colliding in his pocket. He was stunned. Yes, he had the deepest impression of copper coins. Why not imagine Mafa copper coins? Anyway, the book didn't have any requirements. The most new small say is in 6-9 book bar first hair. Thinking of this, he sat up cross-legged, calmed his mind, and cleared his thoughts. The warrior's training also included this part, so it was easy for him to enter a focused state, and then outline the copper coin in his mind. He had long been familiar with the appearance of copper coins, the patterns on them, the texture, every detail was clear, so it was easy for him to outline the general appearance. But at this time, the problem came. When outlining the specific image, he felt powerless. But he wasn't discouraged, maintaining the general appearance unchanged, and trying to outline the details, slowly adding them. The meditation technique said that this process would take a long time and couldn't be accomplished overnight, so he just needed to complete it step by step. As for being slow, that was to be expected. If he could outline a copper coin all at once, it would only mean that he wasn't a normal person. As he practiced, he gradually couldn't support his mental strength, quickly became tired, and then fell asleep. In the other corner of the room, the dog Odom had been observing Delay, and noticed when he was practicing meditation. Seeing him fall, he was a little surprised. This guy persisted for 3 hours on his first try. Amazing, amazing. This guy's talent for wizardry is much stronger than his talent for being a warrior. Seeing Delay fall asleep, he, as usual, spat out a 7-colored light, enveloping him, and then sped away. Delay wasted a few hours, he had to hurry over. Chapter 23. Feller lay on the wooden chair, lazily waving his fan. Although it wasn't summer yet, the sun was already showing its power. There were no trees around, and the sun shone directly on the city gate, making it quite hot. "Sir, Odo is here." A city guard came to Feller's side and quietly woke him up. Feller raised his eyelids, saw Odo standing in the distance, and waved to him. Odo hurried over, lowered his head, and said, "Sir Feller, I've brought the portrait." He raised his hand, holding a scroll. It was specially made, based on his description, and resembled Dorlai by 9 parts. Feller unfolded the scroll, glanced at it, and handed it to the city guard beside him to pass on. They naturally knew what it meant. Feller pondered for a moment and said, "I can help you find him, but I can't guarantee I'll succeed. After all, not everyone comes out every day. If I find him, I'll let you know." Odo nodded, respectfully saying, "Then I'll trouble you, sir. This is a small token of my appreciation." He fumbled in his pocket, took out a money bag, and handed it to Feller. Feller chuckled, "You're sensible. Your father and I are acquaintances, old friends. Consider this money a tip for the brothers." With a wave of his hand, he tossed the money bag to the deputy captain beside him, and the crowd immediately cheered. Taking money means doing things for people, that's the custom. Of course, not all of this money was for these city guards. Half of it had to be given to the squad leader, otherwise, his position as a team leader would be difficult to maintain. Odo quickly left, thinking that the lackey could only be at the mine, and finding Feller at the gate would be accurate. Having lost 2 capable subordinates at once and spending a large sum of money, Odo hated Dorlai to the bone. If he caught that guy, he would definitely beat him to death to relieve his hatred. He hadn't seen him for dozens of days, and Odo couldn't bear it any longer. As the weather gradually warmed up, the Old K blacksmith shop also became increasingly busy. The usage of daily agricultural tools, weapons, and various knives and ironware greatly increased, and Dorlai was constantly busy at the forge. Not long after becoming a level 1 blacksmith, he had his own forge. However, there was a shortage of laborers. Unless he wanted to refine something himself or was very busy, he usually assisted Varric, occasionally taking the lead. At this time, he already had his own exclusive weapon, a short, narrow sword, light and easy to carry. When he went back at night, he no longer needed to carry a hammer. As the weather warmed up, the weapon consumption of the barracks, city defense, police station, and military headquarters outside the city greatly increased. The Old K blacksmith shop received orders almost every day, and soldiers from all sides could be seen coming every day. However, Dorlai soon discovered that after the city guards came once, someone was inexplicably watching him and inquiring about him from other blacksmiths, which made him feel uneasy. He didn't seem to have offended the city guards, did he? This group of city guards quickly left, and soon, Harley called him to the back and asked, "Dorlai, have you offended that lord?" Dorlai was a little confused, "Brother Harley, I haven't left the city for a while." Harley was a little puzzled and said, "Someone just told me that a squad leader is looking for you. Now he has already found you." Dorlai thought about it. He didn't have any enemies. If he had any enemies, it would be Odo, but what relationship did Odo have with the city guards? He thought about it and explained his situation. Harley thought for a moment, then understood a little, patted Dorlai on the shoulder, and said, "I know, don't worry, you are a contracted blacksmith of our Old K blacksmith shop, nothing will happen." The background of the Old K blacksmith shop was the military headquarters, which belonged to the city lord's lineage. It had an official background. The city guards were also under the jurisdiction of the military headquarters. If a squad leader wanted to cause trouble, he had to consider his expression. Even the company commander couldn't do it. After dismissing Dorlai, Harley prepared to take stock of the inventory. Recently, there had been a lot of things going on, and the amount of raw ore had become small. He had to prepare to purchase a batch of goods. As the weather warmed up, the military headquarters prepared to train troops and mobilize all personnel to clear the roads to the county seat. The wear and tear on weapons, armor, and bows and arrows would inevitably be enormous. He had to prepare for this, otherwise, it would be easy to be in a hurry when the time came. Only the Old K blacksmith shop, backed by the city lord, had such channels. Other ordinary blacksmith shops didn't know anything about it. Harley was going to meet the third young master of the Link family, Sainton Link. The Old K blacksmith shop belonged to this third young master. In addition to the Old K blacksmith shop, there were 3 other blacksmith shops belonging to the Link family, all of which were medium-sized or larger, and there was also a large blacksmith shop with 3 level 3 blacksmiths stationed there. There was even a legendary level 4 blacksmith, a high-level blacksmith who could forge level 4 weapons. After probing Harley's manager's tone, Dorlai relaxed, but at the same time felt a strong sense of crisis. That damned Odo actually had connections with the city guards. This was no small matter. Even though he was in the slum, Dorlai knew about the two major security departments in Doman City, the police station and the military headquarters. The military headquarters was responsible for the army and city gate guards, and the police station was responsible for security and patrols. Don't underestimate the city gate guards, their power was not small. If he wanted to leave the city, he had to go through the city guards. This was troublesome. Doman City was backed by mountains, and there were only 2 city gates. The direction close to the mountains was completely closed, and one of the 2 city gates was closed all year round, with only one open. Therefore, Dorlai knew that he was in big trouble, and it would be difficult to go out in the future. So, despite receiving Harley's manager's promise, he was not happy at all. Damn it, that damned Odo! Dorlai felt anger towards a person for the first time. The afternoon was very busy, and Dorlai was not happy at all. He was very depressed. After completing his work, he left the blacksmith shop directly and quietly returned to his small house. For an entire afternoon, Odo's shadow loomed over his heart. Facing the attack of official forces, Dorlai didn't know what to do. Annoyed, he stood in the house, practiced boxing for a while, practiced basic swordsmanship for a while, and then forced himself to calm down before finally exercising his meditation method. After cultivating the meditation method for 3 days, he had completely visualized a copper coin, and the details were not bad at all. According to the book, this was the end. After all, his visualization was the simplest, but Dorlai knew that this could not reflect the strength of his mental power. He couldn't even feel the improvement of his mental power. According to the book, this was actually the end. Visualizing an item was the completion of the first step of meditation. Was this the end? Dorlai thought it definitely wasn't. After thinking about it, he decided to visualize the second copper coin. This method was also inspired by Neri's book, but it was just a concept, and Dorlai was preparing to implement it. The difficulty of visualizing one item, visualizing 2 items, and visualizing 3 items is not the same at all. It increases geometrically. After careful consideration, Dorlai felt that if he could visualize the second copper coin, then his mental power would definitely be greatly improved. Although he felt a little irritable, he still quickly found a way to calm down and began to visualize the second one. A copper coin is very small, and it is easy to outline it with mental power. With Dorlai's current mental power, it is easy to visualize it completely, but the second copper coin does not have the previous foundation of mental power, so it can only be outlined little by little, instead of like the first copper coin, first visualizing a general outline, and then slowly outlining it. This is not very realistic, and the difficulty has increased a lot. Chapter 24. Concentrating his mental power on visualizing the first copper coin was manageable. However, visualizing the second coin required dividing his mental power into 2 parts, which proved difficult. Throughout the night, Dorlai had to maintain the first coin while simultaneously visualizing the second, leaving him feeling mentally exhausted. This was equivalent to forcibly splitting his mental power into 2. But Dorlai knew this approach was correct because he had already visualized one corner of the second coin. Soon, overcome by mental fatigue, he drifted into a deep sleep. Dog Ayaduo's ears perked up, turning towards him. Dorlai's visualization time was getting longer and longer. This talent was indeed much stronger than that of a warrior. It seemed he could develop into a wizard in the future. Wizards were much stronger than warriors, at least in terms of self-preservation. As a member of the Hellhound race, Dog Ayaduo had a very clear understanding of the capabilities of human mages. He quietly left, quickly exiting the city and heading into the mountains, his speed more than double what it was before, like a phantom. His strength was slowly recovering, which made him very happy. Dorlai was truly a lucky star. Is there someone here named Dorlai? Several city guards, including Feller, stood menacingly at the entrance of Old K's blacksmith shop. Fire, Harley's confidant in charge of selling goods, frowned and said, "Yes, there is. What do you want with him?" Feller stepped forward, arrogantly stating, "We suspect he is involved in an assault case and need him for questioning." He stood at the entrance, releasing his aura and scanning the entire blacksmith shop. Through the gaps, Dorlai had already seen Feller at the door, and also Ayaduo standing behind Feller. They were looking for him and had found him. He stood behind Varik, not stepping forward, his heart filled with coldness. This guy is so fast. He found me yesterday, and today he's already at the door? Fire, overwhelmed by Feller's aura, took a few steps back. He knew the details of his blacksmith shop and asked strangely, "I'd like to ask what happened? If it's a security incident or a case of assault, that's the police station's business. What does it have to do with you city guards?" Feller, annoyed by Fire's response, grabbed Fire and pulled him aside, saying, "Do we city guards need to report to the police station to arrest someone? Get out of the way. Can you bear the responsibility for obstructing law enforcement?" Fire was pulled to the side, losing his balance and bumping into a nearby shelf, causing a series of items to fall and clatter. The loud noise caused all the blacksmiths to stop what they were doing and look over. At this time, someone had already gone inside to quickly find Manager Harley. The surrounding blacksmiths gathered around, a good dozen people standing to the side. Feller's strength was only that of a mid-level warrior, and he couldn't gain any advantage against a second-level blacksmith. Seeing the people around him gathering, he didn't dare to be presumptuous anymore. However, his tone remained unchanged as he shouted, "I'm only looking for Doral. Hand him over and everything will be fine. If you don't hand him over, we won't be afraid even if there are many of you." Behind him, all the city guards stood up, supporting their captain. Fire got up from the ground, not angry. He was just an ordinary person, somewhat weak in presence, but he wasn't afraid of Feller. Everyone in these blacksmith shops knew that this was the Link family's property. Feller was causing trouble in their own territory, which was simply foolish. He was about to speak when a deep voice came from behind. "What are you doing? Go back to work." Santis, Morlai and the others, hearing this, quickly left the entrance and returned to their posts. Harley walked over from behind, only glancing at Feller. Feller also saw Harley, and his expression immediately changed. "Why is it you?" Harley didn't look at him but beckoned to Doral, who was hiding behind Varric, saying, "Doral, come here." Seeing Manager Harley come out, Doral breathed a sigh of relief and walked out from behind Varric. He glanced at Feller, then looked at Ayaduo behind him, narrowing his eyes. "This guy is really persistent." He came to Harley's side and said, "Brother Harley." Harley nodded, his round face slightly raised, looking at Feller with some arrogance, as if looking down on him, and said, "Feller, did the Link family know you were coming here?" Feller's expression became slightly ugly as he said, "I'm just here to verify some information with Doral, nothing else." He didn't dare to look at Harley and turned his gaze to Doral. Harley was a member of the Link family, a member of the City Lord's mansion. He was also a member of the City Lord's mansion. He was here to cause trouble for himself. He now regretted not clarifying the situation before rushing over. If he had thought about it a little, he wouldn't be in such an awkward situation now. He didn't know how to step down now. If Harley told the adults about it later, he would definitely be punished. Harley snorted, glancing at Ayaduo behind him, and said, "I knew your purpose yesterday. Just a few hooligans." "Feller, Captain, don't you have any perspective?" Feller's face was displeased. "What do you mean by hooligans? Hooligans can give me money, can you give me money?" But he didn't dare to say these words out loud, and the pressure from the surrounding blacksmiths was great, the surging chi and blood constantly warning him not to move rashly. He considered it for a moment and said righteously, "No matter who it is, hurting others is a violation of the Empire's laws. I'm just here to ask a question. I haven't violated any Imperial law, have I?" Hearing this, Harley knew that Feller was prepared to go his own way. He stepped aside, his face mocking, and said, "Then ask, and leave quickly after you're done." Feller looked at Harley for the first time, his eyes filled with fear. He took a deep breath and turned to Doral. This was a very young boy, his eyes seemingly calm, but actually very scared. He glared fiercely at the boy, his face ferocious, and said, "Did you hit someone?" Doral glanced at Manager Harley, and the surrounding blacksmiths also gave him enough support. He also said in a deep voice, "No." Behind Feller, Ayaduo's face became quite ugly. This damned Doral, how dare he say such a thing? He really is a mud leg. Feller snorted and said, "I have a witness here. He saw you hurt someone. You still don't admit it." After saying one sentence, Doral had calmed down. He easily said, "If I hit someone, then there must be an injured person, right? Where is the injured person? Why should I admit it if there is no injured person? Who is this person? I don't know him." Ayaduo sadly wanted to vomit blood and immediately said, "Why not? You injured 2 of my men. Doral coldly snorted, looking at Ayaduo, his eyes almost narrowed into a line, and immediately retorted, then I hit them, why didn't I hit you? Ayaduo instantly froze. He had abandoned those 2 men, and he didn't know if they had starved to death in the past few days. If he had brought them. He had also seen Manager Harley's strength. Feller clearly knew the other party, and his aura was slightly insufficient. He had long been frightened. At this time, he didn't know what to say. Feller looked at Doral with a gloomy face. He didn't expect that this guy would dare to speak like this in front of him and others. This was sophistry. He immediately stared at Doral and said, little guy, you have to be careful with your words, be careful of saying the wrong thing and losing your head. This was a blatant threat. Doral's face immediately turned pale. Harley's face was somewhat displeased. Threatening my people in front of me? He immediately said, all right, go back where you came from. Don't blame me for not reminding you when the adults blame you later. Spring has come. Hearing the 4 words spring has come, Feller's expression immediately straightened. He naturally knew the meaning of these 4 words. He suddenly laughed and said, then I'll take my leave. After saying that, he turned and left, without any hesitation, not even looking at Doral. Chapter 25. Feller led his men away, arriving with bluster and leaving with bluster, as if nothing had happened. Harley stood at the doorway, watching the direction Feller left in, feeling a little confused. Dory had offended that little hoodlum, and that thing was quite the troublemaker, daring to bribe the city guards. He thought for a moment, then turned to look at the somewhat apprehensive Dory, and said in a deep voice, you don't need to worry about this matter for now. As long as you stay here, no one can touch you. I know you live in the slums, and if possible, you can move closer and live nearby. You earn 20 silver coins a month now, enough to rent a decent place. Although Diamond City was just an ordinary small city, it had a mine as its backing, and the average standard of living was not low. Anyone could live in the slums, and it was free, making it the best choice for most people with unstable incomes. But outside the slums, it was hard to say where ordinary commoners lived. There were rental houses, but the prices were not low. The lowest was 3 or 4 silver coins a month, and slightly better places could even cost dozens of silver coins a month. And that was just for ordinary single rooms. Renting a whole small courtyard would be even more expensive. In the past, he wouldn't have dared to even think about renting a house. Now, he could think about it, but he didn't want to rent a single room shared by many people. That would guarantee safety, but he still had many shady wizard experiments to do in the future, so he could only rent a detached house or a small courtyard, which he couldn't afford. So, he said somewhat awkwardly, I don't want to rent now. Maybe I'll just sleep on the floor outside. He pointed to the outside of the blacksmith shop. Harley's mouth twitched. How stingy was this kid? He was already earning 20 silver coins a month and still didn't want to rent a house? He waved his hand and said, suit yourself, as long as you're not afraid of the cold. It was more than a month into spring now, but it was still quite cold at night. Plus, this was a mountainous area, 3 or 4 degrees colder than outside. It was impossible to be without a house to block the wind. Dory glanced at the side of the forging furnace, which was open on all sides and had no shelter at all. Without the furnace, it would definitely be very cold at night. Forget it, he should just go back to the slums, honestly save money, and wait for his mental strength to increase to the apprentice stage. The legendary path of Neri recorded that wizards could refine many medicines once they entered the apprentice stage. As long as he could casually refine one, he could change his current fate and embark on the path to legend, no, the path to not lacking money. Neri was a great figure. Although Dory believed that he could not become a figure like Neri, it was easy to get rid of his current situation. Damn Ayaduo, damn city guards. Dory deeply remembered Feller. This kind of bastard who didn't treat others as human beings for the sake of some money would be punished sooner or later. There was a lot of work to do this day, and it was very dull. Dory still completed it conscientiously, while learning how to forge various weapons. His current source of income was here, and there was no need to slack off at work because of someone else's difficulties. Soon, the day passed, and it was time to get off work. Varric told Dory when he left that he was now a contracted blacksmith, a first-level blacksmith. His identity had changed, and he was no longer a pauper. He told him to correct his attitude and study forging hard. That Ayaduo was just a small hoodlum, nothing more. Dory shrugged. He walked out of the blacksmith shop and headed towards the slums, but soon realized that something was wrong. Someone seemed to be staring at him. He quickly walked into the slums, plunged into the slums' intricate passages, and hid himself. After he left, Ayaduo's men chased after him, but Dory had disappeared without a trace. Standing at the intersection, Ayaduo slammed the hat in his hand to the ground. This damn piece of trash runs pretty fast, but he still lives in the slums. I'll keep looking for him tomorrow. The little hoodlums next to him nodded fiercely. They had already heard about what their boss did today, and they didn't even give the city guard adults any face. Dory was really turning the world upside down. He's just one person. We can't deal with him in the blacksmith shop, but we can deal with him as long as we catch him outside. Yes, catch him, break his legs, and throw him into the mountains to feed the wild beasts. Hearing this, the anger in Ayaduo's heart gradually dissipated. He had spent a great price this time, but he still couldn't do anything to Dory. His heart was simply bleeding, but Feller had lost face this time, and he had already noted Dory down. As long as Dory left the city in the future, he could find a way to make things difficult for him. You guys keep an eye on him tomorrow. We'll catch him one day. We've heard that he earns 20 silver coins a month. As long as we can catch him, it'll be enough for the brothers to eat and drink well. Ayaduo cheered himself up and looked around. No one in the slums dared to look at them. The surroundings were messy, and it was getting late. He was going to go back, just in time to drink with several important figures, build relationships. He had grown up, and his father had already paved the way for him. He shouldn't waste these relationships. Back in the room, Dory breathed a sigh of relief, touched Dog Ayaduo's head, and looked a little heavy. After playing with Dog Ayaduo's head for a while and scratching him for a while, Dory sat on the bed and began to practice meditation. As for the basic boxing techniques and stance work, he had already worked hard at the blacksmith shop during the day to practice the basic hammer techniques, which was enough. There was no need to practice extra at night. People always had to learn to rest. He quickly entered a meditative state and then visualized the second copper coin. Perhaps because his emotions had fluctuated too much today, his mental strength had increased slightly. The second copper coin grew at a speed visible to the naked eye, which meant that his mental strength had increased slightly. However, this kind of speed was fast in the short term, and the slower it got, the slower it would become, and then it would slowly stop. Soon, Dory felt sleepy and quickly fell into a deep sleep. Dog Ayaduo raised his head and spat a seven-colored light on Dory's body, then shook his body and left leisurely from the gate. Dory came back today with a strange look on his face, probably something happened. This guy was just a dull gourd, and he never told himself anything, and he never talked to himself. Well, he'll follow him to the blacksmith shop tomorrow. With himself helping him to condition his body every day, this guy should be living a good life in the blacksmith shop. It's a pity that this guy is too poor. If he had alchemical medicine to assist him, he should quickly reach the intermediate level of warrior apprentice, but now it's still too slow, but for ordinary people, this speed is already quite fast. Dog Ayaduo was only responsible for the big trends, and he was too lazy to care about small things. After all, Dory needed to grow and needed enough experience, not to live under his wings. He quickly came to the old position in the mountains yesterday, and he changed a place to continue absorbing the energy underground. Although it was just a small mine, it was enough for him to absorb for many days. So far, he had gradually recovered 10% of his power, and Dog Ayaduo was not in a hurry at all. Take it slowly. Dory had not been comfortable these past few days. Not only was he tired from working during the day, but he also had to fight wits and courage with Ayaduo's men when he went back at night. The slums were indeed a no-man's land, and even the patrolling soldiers and peace officers did not go there. Ayaduo was simply lawless there. It was extremely annoying. Although Ayaduo was hateful, as long as he entered the slums, it was Ayaduo's world. For 3 consecutive days, they had no chance to catch him, and Dory's second copper coin had already been visualized into a rough prototype. Now he just needed to add details to it, but even so, he didn't feel that his mental strength had improved much. Chapter 26. According to the book, improving mental strength is a slow and subtle process. It doesn't directly bring enough intuitive manifestations. Only after reaching a certain level will it suddenly erupt. The mark of a wizard apprentice's initial entry is the strengthening of the 5 senses. Dole could feel himself becoming more, but the improvement wasn't significant enough. He knew this was because his mental strength was still too weak. However, he wasn't discouraged by this. After work each day, he continued to match wits with Aoduo. However, Aoduo had become somewhat rampant recently, daring to monitor even the entrance of Old K's blacksmith shop. Time slowly passed into February, and the weather gradually warmed up. The trees along the streets began to sprout. In mid-February, Mondo City had an important festival called the Spring Festival, meaning that spring had arrived, the busy farming season was about to begin, and the things accumulated during winter needed to be started, and so on. Even the blacksmith shop became busy, with many orders and repairs every day. Dole and several level 1 blacksmiths were exhausted. After a tiring day, Dole relaxed a bit after work. It wasn't until he reached the entrance of the slums that he suddenly woke up. At this time, Aoduo's lackeys had already surrounded him, and along with Aoduo, they pounced in his direction. Dole panicked slightly. He glanced around and then spotted a small path, rushing straight towards it. At the entrance of that small path, a person stood up with a sneer, holding an iron pipe in his hand. Seeing Dole approaching, he waved the in his hand, seemingly very disdainful. A street thug. Although Dole was a little flustered, he wasn't panicked inside. Just a small. Although he was young now, the meals he had at the blacksmith shop for the past 2 months weren't for nothing. He quickly rushed to the alley entrance, and swung at him. Dole took a step forward, using his bent arm to block the iron, which struck his arm with a loud bang. After all, the small wasn't a professional, and his strength wasn't great. Dole kicked out, the great force sending the person flying more than 4 meters away, tumbling several times on the ground. He turned and ran, knowing that he could handle 1 or 2, but it would be bad if a whole group surrounded him. The surrounding people were stunned by this. This guy had great strength. Even Aoduo in the distance was surprised. What had this kid been eating recently? He noticed that Dole had grown taller, previously appearing thin and small, but now looking somewhat. His heart sank, and he quickly shouted coldly, "Chase after him! You must catch him!" The entrance to the slums immediately became chaotic. With the influx of several people, running, the muddy ground splashed mud and water, splattering against the walls on both sides. Aoduo wasn't really stupid. Through these days of wits and courage, they had explored the roads of the slums. Dole always left the blacksmith shop after work, so they had already scouted the spot, blocking the way. They just didn't expect the interception to be ineffective. As Dole ran, he looked back, feeling equally. Although these people might not be his match individually, there were many of them. He had just counted, and this guy somehow had 20 subordinates. It was simply. Did his family have a mine? Dole naturally didn't know that this guy had promised that as long as they caught Dole, they would receive silver coins. The money actually came from Dole himself. Rushing through the small alleys, Dole quickly inside. However, he discovered that no matter where Aoduo's people could always block him nearby, making him increasingly angry. This dog really thinks I, Dole, am easy to bully. He came out of a small alley, not immediately, but waited at the entrance, taking out the short sword from his waist and holding it in his hand. Soon, he heard several footsteps coming from afar, running and shouting. Not here. Old 3, is he on your side? No. Then he's still in that. Hurry, chase. Dole analyzed the direction of the voices, while also looking around. The people in the slums basically didn't want to cause trouble, nor did they want to fight. Their incomes were quite low, and once they got sick, they would face unemployment, unaffordable medical treatment, and even the crisis of death. The people here were numb, basically not caring about other people's business. They had been chasing for a long time, but there wasn't any ripple in the slums, not even a loud. This was a hopeless place. Soon, 2 footsteps came from afar, quickly arriving at the alley entrance, and then Aoduo's voice sounded from afar. Damn it, where did he run to? Haven't found him yet. He was running and panting, seemingly exhausted. Dole's eyes lit up immediately. Was it Aoduo himself? But at the same time, his heart tightened, because there were 2 people. He didn't know the other person's strength, but an ordinary was at most a little stronger than an ordinary person. Having recently read Natriyi's legend, he was no longer afraid of ordinary people, because he was no longer ordinary. The sound quickly approached, reaching the alley entrance. Dole crouched down, holding the short sword in his hand. When the footsteps approached, reaching the alley entrance, he quickly from below along the ground at a height of 30 centimeters. Because he was angry, he swung the sword at whoever he saw, accurately and ruthlessly. The iron sword one person's two calves, the sharp blade separating the pants, cutting into the flesh. He only felt a few resistances appear, and then quickly disappear. The blade quickly touched the bone, and then deploy. A scream immediately rang out, and then one person fell to the ground. Dole didn't have time to see who it was, and then he looked up, lifting the sword and killing the other person. That person was stunned at this time. The person next to him fell down, and he didn't know what had happened. When Dole's figure holding the sword stood up from the ground, he saw what was going on. He was shocked. Dole wasn't shocked. He had been worried these days, and he had had enough. He raised the sword and stabbed straight over. Although that person was afraid, he still raised his hand to block Dole's sword. With a scream, his arm was pierced by Dole's sword, and the action stopped abruptly. Dole pulled out the sword, and blood flowed straight down the sword. He saw that this person wasn't Aoduo, and then he lowered his head. The one on the ground must be Aoduo. Aoduo hugged his knees on the ground, screaming repeatedly. My legs, my legs! Dole glanced at Aoduo, turned and came to him, a fierce look flashing in his eyes, and kicked Aoduo's face with great force. As a burst of resistance came, Dole stopped his foot, and Aoduo tumbled several times on the ground, and then the scream stopped abruptly. He passed out. After doing all this, he looked back at the person whose arm he had pierced. That was a teenager, about 18 or 19 years old, leaning against the wall, looking at himself in horror. His arm was pierced by a sword, but he didn't shout a word. Pain and shock, he didn't say a word. Seeing this, Dole was expressionless and turned to leave. There were too many such people in Doming City, countless. They lived by following capable people, working as their thugs, and risking their own lives being worthless. His purpose had been achieved. He had just glanced at Aoduo's miserable state. This guy's legs were ruined. He had cut off several major tendons. Unless he sought help from a wizard's advanced alchemy medicine, he would never be able to stand up again. Feeling extremely happy, Dole quickly disappeared into the slums. Although he was angry in his heart, he didn't have any killing intent. After all, it wasn't a life and death feud. This time, he had made an enemy, but Dole wasn't afraid at all. Instead, he was a little excited. Crippling Aoduo meant that this guy would definitely not dare to provoke him in the future, and he could relax a little. Chapter 28. Knocking Odo down brought immense pleasure to Dorley, lifting his spirits. He quietly returned to his place, petting dog Odo's head repeatedly, which slightly displeased the dog. It stood up and scratched Dorley, leaving claw marks all over his clothes. The boy and his dog immediately began to play. Dog Odo quite liked Dorley and didn't mind playing with him for a bit. With its sensitive nose, it could smell the blood on Dorley. Had the boy drawn blood today? But judging from his expression and demeanor, the outcome seemed favorable, at least he hadn't suffered. After playing for a while, Dorley began to meditate and visualize. The slum erupted in chaos. Soon after Dorley left, some people found the unconscious Odo and the other injured man. Seeing Odo's miserable state, everyone was stunned. Dorley dared to resist? He actually dared to cripple Odo's leg? Everyone exchanged bewildered glances, sensing a major incident was brewing. That night, beside Rose Avenue, inside a house that looked somewhat historical, Odo's father, Sam, the foreman of the Bianchi mine, stared grimly at Odo on the bed. Odo's leg was ruined. Beside Odo, a physician-like figure finished his diagnosis, shrugged at Sam, and frowned, saying, "Several tendons are severed, which isn't a major issue. They can be reconnected, but I'm only a level 2 physician. Even if they're reattached, he won't fully recover. You'll need to find another solution." Sam clenched his fist tightly, his brow furrowed into a deep frown, and asked, "Then who should I seek out?" The physician smiled and said, "For reconnecting severed tendons, the best is the Holy Church's water of life, but we don't have anything like that in the Northern Kingdom. Next is the alchemic potion of tendon renewal from the Ability Association, specifically for treating severed tendons. The tendon renewal potion is a level 2 potion and is quite expensive. You should prepare yourself." Sam was shocked, utterly astonished. Tendon renewal potion? It was the first time he'd heard of it. As the foreman of the Bianchi mine, he didn't have much exposure to such things. However, anything involving the ability association was bound to be expensive. He gritted his teeth and said, "How much does a bottle cost? If it can heal Odo's leg, I'm willing to pay any price." The physician stood up, tidying his things, and said, "About a dozen gold coins." Sam's eyes widened. "I only earn 50 silver coins a month. 10 gold coins? This." The physician curled his lip and said, "Anyway, I'm powerless to help. If you're unwilling to buy it, in a few days, once Odo's muscles atrophy, it'll be impossible to cure, even with money." Sam's fist gradually loosened, then clenched again, his eyes filled with resentment. "That damned brat! I'll definitely kill you." "All right, I'll contact them now." Sam had 2 sons. His eldest son had joined the army and only returned home every few months. Moreover, soldiers in this era lived a precarious existence, always on the verge of death. That's why his second son was the family's heir, and he had always been spoiled. He never expected him to be defeated by a lackey. After seeing the physician off, he stood in the courtyard and quickly considered various methods. He planned to contact acquaintances. Once he knew where that person was, everything would be easier. A damned orphan, a commoner. Wouldn't it be easy to manipulate him? Just like that. But the thought of Odo being defeated by someone like that made Sam's expression unpleasant. Beside the Rose Manor, where Vice City Lord Owen's family resided, in a small house within a small courtyard, a guard walked in from outside and soon arrived at the backyard. The backyard was an open space. Kadiah, dressed in black, was wielding a dueling sword, practicing against a wooden dummy, his posture straight, his arm like a sword, the sword tip pointing to the sky. The guard entered the courtyard. Even from a distance, he could sense the immense power emanating from Kadiah, filling him with awe. He stopped some distance away, bowed slightly, and said, "Lord Kadiah, the child you asked me to watch had an incident yesterday." He recounted the events of the previous day. Kadiah's face was calm and expressionless. He lowered his sword, stood upright, reached into his pocket, flicked out a silver coin, and said, "I understand. Thank you for your trouble." The guard caught the silver coin, slammed a fist against his chest, and said, "Serving you is my honor, sir." Kadiah said, "Continue to monitor him. Report any developments to me." The guard nodded. Although Kadiah was merely a dueling master employed by the Owen family, his lineage was quite rare. Countless people wanted to place their descendants under his tutelage, but Lord Kadiah didn't approve of any of them. It seemed that the child had caught his eye. He quickly left. Kadiah stood in the courtyard, his expression filled with a different meaning. That child, someone else is actually watching him? However, the worse his life is, the better it will be for my plans. That child's talent is not bad, worth nurturing. However, the specific results are still uncertain. Dorley is just a seed he casually found, let's wait and see. Odo, Sam, just small fries. To Kadiah, the father and son were like maggots on the roadside, easily crushed. He didn't interfere. Instead, he continued to stand there, then gently parted his legs, looked straight ahead, and slowly thrust his sword out. Body like a sword, form like a sword, hand like a sword. This was Kadiah's most powerful sword strike, famous throughout Doman City, just an ordinary thrust. But if a master were watching, they would see that in this simple thrust, he subtly changed several extremely minute movements, capable of responding to dozens of opponents' variations. It was not just a simple sword strike. One night passed. Dorley left his home refreshed, heading straight for the blacksmith shop. As he walked into the blacksmith shop, he saw Harley the blacksmith with his back to him, directing others to move something. It was a large pile of iron boxes. The iron boxes were heavy. Even with the arm strength of a grown blacksmith, they were difficult to lift. Dorley was somewhat surprised. Were these all raw ore? Several hundred boxes were placed at the entrance to the backyard. Clearly, they were all to be moved inside. Dorley came behind Harley and bowed slightly, saying, "Brother Harley." Harley turned his head, glanced at Dorley, his expression slightly darkened, and said, "I heard about what happened yesterday. Someone might come looking for you today." Dorley was stunned, the slight joy he felt suddenly halting. He carefully asked, "What's going on?" Harley thought for a moment and said in a deep voice, "The father of the person you beat went to the police station. The police will be looking for you today, but it's okay, I'll protect you. Dorlai's heart leaped, slowly turning cold, and he felt somewhat flustered. The city guard and the police station were different. The police station was responsible for maintaining order, specifically dealing with fights and brawls. If the police came looking for him, he would be somewhat apprehensive. The Doman City police station had a notorious reputation. Anyone who went in without money or power would suffer greatly, that was a known fact. The other party had money and power, wouldn't he be unable to get out if he went in? His expression changed. Harley looked at Dorlai, sighed, and said, "Don't worry, it's okay. I've already inquired about that person, just a small foreman from the Bianchi mine. I doubt he dares to come causing trouble." Dorlai nodded. "Then thank you, Brother Harley." He thought for a moment, then hesitantly pulled out 10 silver coins from his pocket, painfully handing them to Harley. Harley saw this and said unhappily, "Does your brother Harley lack these few silver coins? Go, 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 go play on the side, don't disturb my work. It might be busy for a while, you have to put in some effort." Chapter 29. After Hag scolded him, Dorlai felt secretly pleased. After the new year, Dorlai turned 13, his height shot up, his weight also noticeably increased, and his build grew larger. The number 3 iron hammer in his hand no longer felt very heavy, and his strength greatly increased. With vigorous blood and energy, Dorlai felt his whole body was full of power. Hag's words made him feel like this was a home. Soon, everyone arrived. After breakfast, as expected, everyone started to get busy. The military headquarters sent several carriages loaded with various kinds of military equipment, all of which needed maintenance, and some needed to be recast. The quantity was very large. Only then did Dorlai understand what Foreman Harley meant by being busy. The quantity was indeed large, but with such a large quantity, his commission would inevitably be very rich. Everyone was the same, and they all worked very hard. Varric was also very happy, because the more goods there were, the closer he was to the dochi cultivation method, and the closer he was to becoming a level 3 blacksmith. Besides Varric, Santos and Morlai were the same, honestly working, without a moment to relax. Dorlai spent the whole day in suspense, but no one from the so-called police station came to make trouble. It wasn't until the morning of the 3rd day that someone from the police station came looking for him. They didn't come looking for Dorlai, but went directly to Hag. Others might not know the inside story of Old K's blacksmith shop, but the police station naturally knew. Dorlai didn't know what they said. The people from the police station quickly left, seemingly somewhat crestfallen. As they left, that person glanced at Dorlai, as if trying to remember him. That gaze made Dorlai feel a little uneasy, and his hand trembled, accidentally smashing a sword blank. When the police officer saw this, his heart tightened, and he left directly. Soon, Hag came out from the back, his face displeased. Dorlai ruined the work, so he simply stopped doing it. He gently came to Hag's side and said, "Hag, what's going on?" Harley pondered for a moment and said, "What else could it be? They want me to hand you over. I said you are our contracted blacksmith, so of course that's impossible. Besides, the incident happened in the slums. Don't they know who goes to the slums? That Odo was just asking for death." Dorlai breathed a sigh of relief. Hag was on his side, there was no doubt about that. Hag left, but Dorlai's heart was not at peace at all. Since they couldn't do it openly, they would probably resort to underhanded methods. He knew better than anyone what kind of people were in the police station. He just didn't understand. That Odo had connections with both the police station and the city guard. Was that how the world of the rich was? He raised his head and glanced outside the blacksmith shop. At this moment, he felt that, apart from the blacksmith shop, the whole world seemed to be his enemy. The arrival of the police station meant that he didn't even dare to wander around the city. If he was discovered and taken away directly, then he would truly be helpless. What a load of crap! Dorlai's eyes darkened, and he felt that his future was bleak. He now urgently wanted to advance to become a wizard's apprentice, and then learn the method of refining potions from above to improve his survival rate. If warriors were all about head-on confrontation, then wizards were synonymous with mystery. If becoming a blacksmith was to support himself, then becoming a formal warrior or wizard was the foundation for establishing himself. Dorlai felt alert. When it was time to get off work in the afternoon, he didn't leave the blacksmith shop directly. He waited until dark before he quietly slipped away from the back door. In a dim room, Sam paced back and forth. Soon, the door creaked open, and Carmen's figure walked in from outside. Sam glanced at Carmen's face, his heart sank, and he said, "Lord Carmen, how did it go?" Carmen pondered for a moment and said, "It's not possible for the time being. You also know that I'm just a small detective. Old K's blacksmith shop is the property of the Link family, which belongs to the city lord's mansion. It's already not easy for me to see Foreman Harley to ask for someone." Sam pondered for a moment. He looked at Carmen and said, "Then what do you mean?" He had accepted his money, so he had to do things for him. Carmen thought for a while and said, "This matter still needs the chief of police to take action. Don't you know my superior, Dis? We can find him." Sam's face sank. Finding the chief of police would be another big expense, but what was this little bit of money for avenging his second son? He could just work for the chief of police in the future and smuggle some minerals out to make up for some loopholes. "Then I'll have to trouble you, Lord Carmen." He took out a gold coin from his pocket and handed it to Carmen. Carmen accepted the gold coin and left satisfied. He had already investigated Dorley's background clearly. He was just a kid from the slums. As long as he could get money, what did it matter if he offended Harley? He could just find a way to make up for it later. Dorley was just a small character. He quickly left the room. Sam sat in the room and soon left. He had been contacting acquaintances these past few days, wanting to buy alchemical medicines through the Ability Institute, but he still hadn't been able to contact anyone. The Ability Institute was an even harder place to get into than the city lord's mansion. He needed some time, but when he thought of Odo's injuries, Sam became a little anxious. That little beast must die, he thought fiercely in his heart. Walking on the dark streets, Dorley tried his best to walk in the shadows, diluting himself and reducing others' attention to him. He didn't go to the slums, but followed the street and came to the city. He was going to the pharmacy. When he got off work today, Hag gave him half a month's salary and commission, a full 30 silver coins, which was heavy. With these silver coins, he went to the pharmacy to buy some of the medicinal materials he needed. These medicinal materials were very common, and ordinary medicinal material raw material stores could buy them. After walking for about 10 minutes, he came to the door of a pharmacy called Future. He looked around, and no one was paying attention to him, so he walked in. The pharmacy was not big. All the herbs and finished medicines were placed on the open. Dorley easily saw the raw materials he wanted. Looking at the price below, his eyes suddenly paused. "Hey, these medicines don't seem expensive." The main ingredient of level 1 mental power magic medicine, Mind Awakening Grass, is only 2 silver coins per plant, and most of the others are between 50 copper coins and 1 silver coin. He calculated that if he bought all the raw materials for mental power alchemy magic medicine, he could buy about 5 servings. After seeing these, he immediately had an idea. If possible, he needed to buy all these things back today. He didn't have the equipment and couldn't directly make finished alchemical medicines, but eating them directly was also fine, but most of the medicinal properties would be lost. But now it was too late. What he needed now was to advance in the fastest time possible. Dorley had read Nail Yuyi's book very deeply and knew some of the principles of walking the rivers and lakes, so he didn't directly buy what he needed, but bought a lot of miscellaneous herbs and mixed them together. He spent all the 30 silver coins on him in one go. Only then did he leave satisfied, but because of this, he only bought 3 servings of mental power alchemy magic medicine, and the rest of the money was used to buy other herbs. After leaving the pharmacy, Dorley bought a hooded coat on the way, wrapped his entire head, and walked to the slums in a low-key manner. It was already 10 o'clock in the evening when he returned to where he lived. As usual, he played with the dog Odo, which was also a relaxing process to calm himself down. Taking the medicine bag out from behind him, Dorley took out the medicinal materials he needed and placed them on the ground. Then, in order, he put them in his mouth one by one, chewed them, and swallowed them. Chapter 30. How to describe this process? It was a bit uncomfortable, like eating grass. My mouth, throat, and stomach were all extremely uncomfortable. I swallowed it forcefully, and before long, I felt a cool sensation in my stomach. Dore quickly closed his eyes. "It's coming." Dog Aoduo, at this moment, got up from the ground and stood in front of Dore, looking at the herbs on the ground with a surprised expression on his dog face. He could sense Dore's urgency, but he didn't know where this urgency came from. Was this little guy in some kind of trouble? Potions in potionology are naturally best when extracted, but eating them raw also works. Duray clearly didn't have the means to extract them, so he could only eat them raw. But why didn't he wait a while and get a set of alchemical tools? It seems like something happened. He glanced at what Duray had just eaten. It was the lowest grade beginner mental strength potion, which could increase a tiny bit of mental strength, almost negligible. Forget it, I won't go out tonight. I'll keep an eye on this little guy. Dog Aoduo crawled back, but he glanced over here from time to time. His strength had recovered to level 3, so taking care of a beginner magic apprentice was naturally no problem. Let him do whatever he wants, as long as he doesn't kill himself. What is the concept of level 3? In the entire Doman city, he is like a god, and no creature can threaten him. At this time, Duray had already entered his sea of consciousness. With the addition of the cool sensation, Duray's second copper coin was outlined at a speed visible to the naked eye. As it was filled in step by step, the copper coin quickly took shape and was completely filled. At this time, the cool sensation had not yet disappeared. Sensing this, Duray took a deep breath and began to outline the third copper coin. With the successful outlining of the second copper coin, Duray clearly felt that he was different. He didn't know exactly what it was, but he felt exceptionally clear-headed and quick-witted. Outlining the third copper coin was extremely fast, almost as soon as he thought of something, it appeared on the third coin. After a while, the third copper coin was also completely outlined. The 3 copper coins rose and fell in the sea of consciousness, very happily. When he was about to outline the 4th copper coin, the cool sensation disappeared. Obviously, the power brought by the medicine was gone. He breathed a sigh of relief and began to consolidate the results, trying to improve the 2 copper coins he had just outlined as much as possible. At this time, he knew that he had entered the level of a beginner wizard apprentice. Acute senses and quick thinking were the most obvious signs. He opened his eyes. After being promoted to wizard apprentice, Duray realized why the Nary book said that wizardry is the true meaning of the profession. After being promoted to wizard apprentice, although it did not bring an improvement in strength, the 5 senses were more acute and the perception was stronger. Even the breeze, sunlight, and colors that he hadn't noticed before were now so vivid in his eyes. Every move of the world was full of wonderful rhythms. Hearing, sight, smell, feeling, and touch have all been greatly strengthened. He could even sense Dog Aoduo's gaze on him. This was a very miraculous thing, as if he was dozens of times more sensitive than before. Dog Aoduo also noticed Duray's abnormality at this time. After a slight perception, he knew that this little guy had been promoted to magic apprentice. Although the time was a bit slow, he had finally entered. Of course, his essential combat power has not improved, and he can't even use many witchcraft spells, but after all, it is a good start. Wizards in the apprentice stage have pitifully low combat power, relying entirely on various auxiliary items, such as alchemical products and various alchemical potions. Their own offensive ability is very low, but anyone who underestimates a wizard apprentice will definitely be in big trouble, especially those rich wizard apprentices, with endless tricks. Just the various alchemical items can overwhelm a large group of advanced warrior apprentices. The keen perception brings a stronger understanding of the outside world, and at the same time, the control of oneself is greatly strengthened. After Duray felt his own situation, he felt that he should be close to the great perfection of a beginner warrior. He clenched his fist, and the power erupting from his muscles had reached the limit of his body, with surging blood flowing through his blood vessels, filling his fingertips. This feeling is very wonderful. It seems that I have to move to a new house. Living here is extremely unsafe, and after becoming a wizard apprentice, I need to have my own laboratory to refine my own alchemical products. Only wizard apprentices with alchemical products have combat power and can save their lives. Otherwise, a pure wizard apprentice will not be able to beat a warrior by relying on bare hands. Therefore, many wizards in the early stages will also practice warrior professions, or other professions, to make up for the shortcomings in combat, but they will abandon them after becoming formal wizards. Formal wizards can control the free energy between heaven and earth without using alchemical products, and release powerful witchcraft spells. Powerful wizards can even destroy the world and easily erase a mountain, which is definitely not something that the warrior profession can compare to. But weak wizard apprentices can't do anything. This is the embarrassment of the wizard profession, and it is difficult for wizards to advance, many times more difficult than warriors. Therefore, Duray did not dare to put all his bets on wizardry. The warrior profession also needs to advance. I don't know how long it has passed, but he was finally a little tired and fell asleep deeply. Early the next morning, he went out in good spirits and quietly came to the blacksmith shop. He was not relaxed at all, because as soon as he arrived at the blacksmith shop, he found someone watching him from a distance. He didn't look back. Although it was just an intuition, it was a very strong intuition. He deliberately turned his body and glanced at it out of the corner of his eye. There was indeed someone watching this side, and his heart sank. These Damayaduo and his son are really like chewing gum, still entangled and unwilling to let go. The experiment must be carried out as soon as possible. Only with the assistance of alchemical potions can I feel safe. Although staying in the blacksmith shop is safe, it is hard to guarantee that I will not fall into the hands of others one day. He is just an ordinary person, a very ordinary person, and he dare not put his fate here. After reading Neri's legend, his eyes are no longer on Doman City, but on the vast world outside. He doesn't want to accidentally die in this corner. In the field of wizards, there are too many ways to kill someone silently, and the best ones are various poisons, plant poisons, heavy metal poisons, acidic and alkaline poisons, and even colorless and odorless poisons. There are too many, and the methods of beginner wizard apprentices mostly come from this aspect. In addition to poison, you can also refine some small things, such as bombs and hidden weapons. There is no way, beginner apprentices are so shabby. Only when you reach advanced apprentices can you use materials and some powerful witchcraft spells. Intermediate apprentices are not much different from beginner apprentices in essence.